A soul that spans thousands of years, a humble youth, a mysterious ox cart, intertwined with fate, portraying a legendary tale of gold, silver, and iron. The magnificent history of the Three Kingdoms' new hegemony has thus begun. Keywords of the novel. The War of the Three Kingdoms. No pop-ups, the War of the Three Kingdoms. Ending the world. Download the complete TXT collection, and read the latest chapters on the War of the Three Kingdoms. Ending the world. Chapter 1. Survival of the Jedi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Survival of the Jedi. This is an almost empty room, with only a small table and a few bamboo skewers. On the small table, a small oil lamp flickers with bean-sized seedlings, causing the room to light up and down. In the middle of the room, a witch dressed in a black embroidered robe was dancing with her hands and feet, occasionally making strange and piercing screams, as if a vengeful soul was dying. Her cold and stern eyes were fixed on a young man on the ground. The young man looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old, lying on a tattered grass mat, wearing coarse cloth clothes. His face was slightly long, his eyebrows were like swords, his nose was high and straight, and he looked handsome. His skin was slightly black, and he was tall and burly. Years of hunting had made his hands and feet grow thick and sturdy. But at this moment, he seemed to have fallen ill and was in a coma, constantly shouting some strange language in his mouth, which was a dialect that the locals didn't quite understand. Lao Fong. Young Shua has been there a few times, let's go to a different place. I'm afraid I won't make it. What if I miss the train? This is a soul that has been transformed from a previous life. He is a famous rock climber with a strong physique, intelligent mind, and tenacious personality. During an outdoor mountaineering, he fell into an unfathomable cave, and his soul never dies. He travels through 1800 years of time and space, attaching himself to a 16-year-old hunter who also fell into a rock crevice. He has experienced an incredibly long journey through time and space in the darkness, with stars changing and time taking turns. When his soul awakens, he has already traveled through the long tunnel of time and space for 1800 years. It has been 2 days since the young hunter was rescued. He only woke up once and quickly fell into a coma. He was not sick, as if he had lost his soul, talking nonsense that frightened the locals. In the corner squatted an elderly man, about 60 years old, who was the grandfather of the young man. The parents of the young man had already died of illness, and before his death, he entrusted the child to him. If the child had any problems, how could he explain them to his deceased son? At this moment, he was extremely worried in his heart. His grandson fell into the crevice of Gui Cho Rock, but was caught by a thick shrub and survived the disaster. But the grandson who carried it back seemed like a different person, talking nonsense that no one understood. The people in the same neighborhood heard that he had fallen into the crevice of the Ghost Sorrow Rock and unanimously believed that he had been possessed by a ghost. Some even suggested burning him to death. The old man sighed, after all, this was his grandson. Anyway, he wanted to save him, and all his hopes were pinned on this witch. Outside the broken window, a group of people stared at the children on the ground with hatred, whispering. Have you heard him? He's talking nonsense again. It seems like he's talking about a train, what a train is. Have you heard of it? The people around shook their heads, and no one had ever heard of a train. Someone cleverly shouted, I know, this must be the car that the Flame Ghost King was in. Oh my goodness, he's a demon. An old man stared at the boy and gritted his teeth, saying, he will bring disaster to us inside, we must burn him. Burn him. The villagers outside shouted loudly. At this moment, a burst of crying and barking from a distance, as well as the wild barking of a family dog, caused a firelight to soar into the air. Everyone was stunned and didn't know what had happened. At this moment, a young man rushed towards him in panic and shouted, Li Kuei, not good, the Chao army is here to catch the strong soldiers. In the 6th year of Jianan, the Battle of Runan broke out. Liu Bei recruited tens of thousands of Yellow Turban army led by Liu Bei and Gong Du stationed in Runan County, and advanced towards Shudu, attempting to take advantage of Cao Cao's battle in Hebei to launch a surprise attack on Shudu. At this point, Cao Cao had already ended the Battle of Enchanting, withdrew his troops and returned to Shudu. He personally led a large army to attack Liu Bei in the south. Cao Cao swore to completely eliminate Liu Bei this time. On the plain north of Enchanting County in Runan County, a cavalry of over 1,000 soldiers from the Cao army drove thousands of commoners running in the wilderness. The so-called commoners were men of all ages, about 5 or 6,000, brought from various parts of Runan County. These civilian soldiers are not wearing armor and randomly wielding various weapons such as broken knives, broken swords, hoes, and wooden sticks. Many of them are still unarmed. The clothing colors were also very messy, some were wearing short clothes, some were wearing sheetsy crown robes, and even some were wearing short loincloths and bare upper bodies, forming a chaotic group, running aimlessly on the field. The cavalry kept rushing past the side of the line, and when they saw someone running a little slower, they whipped their whip and shouted loudly, "Run for me." In extreme exhaustion, people kept falling to the ground, and the cavalry of the Cao army showed no mercy. They raised their spears and fiercely stabbed these fallen people to the ground. "Run quickly. If you dare to pretend to be dead, you will be executed without mercy." The screams echoed one after another in the wilderness, causing fear in the hearts of every soldier and soldier, who ran desperately towards the east. In the team, a tall young man is sometimes fast and sometimes slow, with agile movements that won't fall behind and be whipped, but he will never run ahead. He was a young hunter who had awakened from a coma. His previous life was called Liu Jian, a famous rock climber who loved outdoor activities and had a strong physique. Unfortunately, he fell into a deep abyss while climbing. After waking up, he was possessed by a young hunter, and his later thinking completely replaced the possessed youth, so much so that he was still in a state of confusion and ignorance about this era, not even knowing his own name, and was captured by the Cao army as a strong soldier. He really wants to ask the people around him, what year is it now and where is he now? He knew he had fallen into the Three Kingdoms era, and the large Cao character on the banner was particularly eye-catching. "Run quickly." A middle-aged man pushed him hard and said, "The officers and soldiers behind are whipping hard." As Liu Jian turned around, dozens of steps away, more than 100 cavalry soldiers from the Cao army were desperately whipping away with leather whips. Many people were beaten to the head and bleeding, and those who fell were immediately stabbed to death with spears. Liu Jian sighed, his only advantage now is that he has a little more brain than these poor peasant soldiers like sheep. He stretched his neck again and looked behind him. There was a black line in the distance, about a few miles away, following them from a distance. He had already guessed what the Cao army was going to do. If he had guessed correctly, they were cannon fodder being driven to death. There should be thousands of troops and horses waiting for them ahead. He didn't know how to survive, but one thing he knew in his heart was that he couldn't compete to run ahead, but he couldn't fall behind either. Only when the war broke out and the Cao army didn't care about them, could he find an opportunity to escape. Liu Jian followed the crowd with agile movements, and at this moment, he was very grateful for the gift from heaven, which allowed him to attach himself to a strong and agile young man, giving him the capital to save his life. He is a young hunter in this life, living in the mountainous areas of southern Runan County. He has been running in the steep mountains for years, fighting against wild animals, running at an extremely fast speed, and his body is agile. Liu Jian's excellent physique and intelligent mind brought by his past life gave him the capital to live. He was not as desperate as others, but patiently waiting for the opportunity to escape. At this moment, there was suddenly a riot ahead, and someone shouted, "There is an army ahead, it's the Yellow Turban army." Liu Jian also saw that, 1 mile ahead, a dense army suddenly appeared, consisting of about 10 to 20,000 people, with swords and guns like a forest, banners like clouds. Under a red flag, there were rows of murderous soldiers arranged in layers, with thousands of people in front being crossbowmen. Thousands of bows and crossbows were coldly aimed at them, scaring the soldiers to the extreme. They shouted in fear and turned around to run back. Just then, the drums of Chao's attack rang, dong. 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 The sound of drums shook the sky and earth. 1,000 cavalry of the Chao army forcibly drove away the civilian soldiers and killed them towards the enemy position. At this time, they no longer used whips to drive them away, but instead used knives and spears to stab them. Groups of civilian soldiers attempting to escape were killed on the spot. The front was a threat of death, while the back was a bloody slaughter, with screams before being killed, severed heads, piled up corpses, blood splattering everywhere, and limbs and arms flying horizontally. Under the pressure of the god of death, thousands of civilians rushed towards the Yellow Turban army, shouting for their lives echoing through the wilderness. The army ahead is the main force of the Yellow Turban army in Runan, with a total of 12,000 people, led by General Gong Du. He was ordered by Liu Bei to support Liu Bei's army, but did not expect to be attacked by Chao's army halfway through. "General Gong, why did you kill all the mobs?" a deputy general frowned and asked. "This is a commoner who died, and the real Chao army is behind." Gong Du sneered and shouted loudly, "Bow and arrow ready." Thousands of bows and arrows were raised to the ground, and the cold arrows aimed at the rushing commoners. Lu Jian was sandwiched among the commoners, but he ran diagonally towards the northeast direction. He had already discovered a forest in the northeast direction and immediately realized that it was his way of life. Lu Jian kept dodging the rushing crowd and gradually moved to the edge of the army, but he could no longer pass. A group of Chao cavalry blocked his escape route to the north. At this moment, the Yellow Turban army launched a flurry of arrows, with dense arrows rushing towards them like locusts. In an instant, screams of agony erupted, and large areas of civilians were shot over. They had no leather armor and could not resist the enemy's bows and arrows. Thousands of civilians were in chaos, crying loudly. They had no way to escape, and the cavalry of the Chao army around them forced them to charge. If they retreated slightly, they mercilessly slaughtered. Lu Jian was knocked to the ground in the chaos, and at that moment, he suddenly felt something. The earth is trembling. He quickly turned his head and fixed his eyes on the distance, only to see the west shrouded in gray and dust, blocking the sunlight. The setting sun turned blood red, and boundless cavalry appeared in the distance. Quickly, the earth trembled even more violently, and the thunderous sound of horse hooves echoed in the northwest. The dark cavalry covered the sky and earth, and the soldiers shouted in terror, "It's cavalry." More than half of the thousands of civilians have died or been injured. Their mission has been completed, disrupting the bow and arrow formation of the Yellow Turban army. 1,000 Chao cavalry responsible for escorting them abandoned them and took the lead in advancing into the bow and arrow positions. At this moment, no one cared about the lives of these commoners anymore. Lu Jian and others had this opportunity. He reacted very quickly and shouted to the crowd beside him, "Follow me, run into the forest." Lu Jian ran wildly, but soon he realized something was wrong. There were still hundreds of steps left in the forest, and the cavalry of the Chao army had already killed 200 steps away, far faster than them. Before they could run away from the forest, they would be completely washed away. Lu Jian, who came from later generations, fully utilized his intelligence at this moment. He immediately lay down in a depression, carried 7 or 8 corpses piled on top of him, and secretly looked back through the cracks in the corpses. At this point, the cavalry of the Chao army had already arrived, with dense arrows shooting at them. Hundreds of soldiers ran slower and screamed in agony as they were shot down. This cavalry was led by Xiahou Yuan and consisted of 6,000 elite cavalry. They were ordered to launch a surprise attack on Liu Bei's supporting army. Their troops were divided into 2 routes, with 1,000 cavalry responsible for escorting the captured soldiers. Another 5,000 people, led by Xiahou Yuan, waited for the fighter jets in the rear. At this time, the 1,000 cavalry of the Chao army, who were escorting the people, had already taken the lead in entering the enemy's archery formation, eliminating the threat of bows and arrows from the main cavalry of the Chao army. They began to launch an attack and ambushed the main force of the Yellow Turban army. Xiahou Yuan is 8 feet 3 in height, with a large arm and a round waist. His gaze is cold and sharp like electricity, making a large iron gun weighing 80 pounds look like a heavenly god. He shouted loudly, "Kill me to the death." The Chao army's iron cavalry was killed like a storm, like tigers and leopards. Wherever they passed, their heads flew, their limbs split, and blood mist filled the air. The desperate civilians were drawn under their iron hooves, howling in pain, and their horses trampled on mud. Gong Du led the Yellow Turban army to face the battle. He waved his big sword and challenged Xiahou Yuan, but after a few rounds, he didn't stop and ran away with his horse. However, his horse was not fast, and Xiahou Yuan caught up with him. He shot him in the back, causing Gong Du to scream and die immediately. Xiahou Yuan lifted his body high and laughed loudly, "Is this the army of the great ear thieves?" The main general of the Yellow Turban army was killed and soon collapsed, leading to a brutal massacre in the wilderness. When the last warhorse leaped over Lu Jian, he jumped up from the depression and ran frantically towards the forest hundreds of steps away. This was his only chance to escape. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. A Bullcart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. A Bullcart. Only half an hour later, over 12,000 soldiers under Gong Du's command were killed or injured, with only a few soldiers able to escape. The captured soldiers were also almost killed in the melee. The cavalry of the Chao army seized a portion of the grain and grass, while the rest was burned down. 6,000 cavalry turned around and headed south to kill Enchanting. At this moment it was already dark and blood filled the vast wilderness. Groups of wild dogs appeared, nibbling on the corpses. It was particularly important to stay away from the battlefield. Lu Jian ran more than 20 miles in one breath. He was very clever. After running into the forest, he circled in a big circle and headed northwest, where the cavalry came from. This way, he could avoid the cavalry. He ran into a low hill, where the trees were lush and there was no longer any danger. He found a large stone and sat down, panting and resting. The few servants who had escaped with him had all dispersed, leaving him alone. Lu Jian sighed. It had been 3 days since he arrived in this era, and it was only then that he could calm down and think about some questions. In fact, he could already guess when it was now. He was familiar with the romance of the Three Kingdoms and heard some commoners talk about Runan County, Chao Army, and Huangjin Army. By stringing these clues together, he vaguely understood. This should be Liu Bei coming out from Yuanshao and taking over the remaining Yellow Turban army of Liu Bei and Gong Du and Runan, preparing to attack Su Du, but being counterattacked by Cao Cao. Yes. Now it was the 6th year of Jianan, and Lu Jian suddenly remembered that the next step was for Liu Bei to seek refuge with Liu Biao in Jingzhou. So, where should I go? To seek refuge with Liu Biao, or to seek refuge with Cao Cao? Of course it should be to seek refuge with Cao Cao, but what does he rely on? Lu Jian's heart was in turmoil and he couldn't make up his mind for a moment. At this moment, his stomach growled and he reached out to touch his arms, but unexpectedly found that there was still half a cake, as if it was leftover from noon. He was overjoyed that having this half cake would be enough to support him until tomorrow morning. Lu Jian took out the pancake and took 2 bites. The Han dynasty did not yet understand the technique of fermentation, so they made solid pancakes that were very strong and difficult to bite, and even more dry and difficult to swallow. Therefore, this type of pancake is also known as water-infused pancake, which must be broken and soaked in water to eat. The cake was hard to swallow and his throat was burning. Lu Jian stood up and looked around, looking for a small stream. This is a low and gentle hill, only slightly higher than the plain, but it is more than 10 miles in radius. The entire hill is covered by lush forests, and there is an east-west official road passing through the middle of the forests, which is a must-pass road to Jingsheng in the west. There were many strange noises in the woods at night, and from time to time, the mournful cries of night owls were heard, which made people shiver. Without self-defense, he dared not walk in the woods. War broke out in Runan County, with people killed everywhere and groups of wild dogs running around in the wilderness. Once they ran into them, they would surely die. Lu Jian walked westward along the official road, about 2 or 3 miles away. He noticed a fork in the road ahead and listened carefully. There seemed to be a babbling sound of flowing water in front of the fork. Lu Jian was overjoyed in his heart and ran towards the fork in the road. After about 100 steps, he saw a 1-foot-wide small river winding through the forest. The moonlight shone through the treetops and shone on the riverbank, adding a touch of mystery to it. But Lu Jian suddenly stopped running more than 10 steps away, his gaze fixed on the back of a bush behind the bushes. There was an overturned ox cart with a thick wooden wheel raised high, surrounded by several deceased people. An old man lay under the wheel, cut to pieces, with the driver hanging from the shaft and several arrows shot in the back. Not far away, there was also a man in white lying on the ground. There is also a corpse in the car, which is a young man, about 15 or 16 years old. He is similar in age and quite tall, only slightly shorter than him. He was shot several times and covered in blood. Lu Jian sighed. In a chaotic world, people are not as good as dogs. These people may seem to have some status, but what's the use of their status? In a chaotic world, they have to be like themselves, able to run and hide in order to escape their lives. At this moment, he suddenly noticed that the man in white seemed to move, and Lu Jian was stunned. Has this person not died yet? He quickly stepped forward. This was a middle-aged man who had been hit in the back of his head, his flesh and blood blurred, and it seemed that there were no injuries elsewhere. He reached out and touched the man's nose, breathing heavily, as if he had just fainted. He tore off the man's robe collar, soaked some water in the river, slowly squeezed into the man's mouth, and wiped his forehead again. Perhaps water had an effect, and the man slowly opened his eyes. He glanced vaguely at Lu Jian and whispered, "Encountered. Chao Jun Cavalry, tell Lu Zhou Mu." Just as he finished speaking, he fainted again. Lu Jian scratched his head and felt a headache. It was unclear which Lu Zhou Mu it was, whether it was Liu Bei from Yuzhou, Liu Biao from Jingzhou, or Lu Zhang from Yizhou. These 3 people seemed to be Lu Zhou Mu. Lu Jian put down the man and searched around in the ox cart. Apart from some broken and scattered bamboo slips, there was nothing else that disappointed him. Even if he had a knife, it would be great. He looked around again, trying to keep his gaze as far away as possible. Suddenly, he seemed to see something in a patch of grass more than 10 steps away. Lu Jian quickly stepped forward and found a leather bag in the grass. The bag was heavy and surprised him. How could it be thrown into the grass? He quickly opened his leather bag and a short sword jumped into his sight. The scabbard of the short sword was decorated with luxury, wrapped in gold and silver thread, and inlaid with a few gemstones. He drew out the short sword, and the blade of the white forest sword was exceptionally sharp, making it a precious sword. At this moment, if he was alert, he had an instinct to avoid danger that he had developed through countless hunting trips. This instinct made him involuntarily roll to the left and roll out a foot away. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of breaking through the air, 2 arrows shot back and forth, straight at the position just now. Lu Jian only then realized that 2 soldiers from the Chao army appeared in front and behind, holding spears and crossbows, silently surrounding him. These are 2 cavalry soldiers from the Chao army, and the leather bag in the grass is where they hide. When they quietly returned to retrieve it, they found that it had been picked up, which made them furious. "Kid, put things down," the soldier shouted fiercely. Lu Jian put down his skin bag, but drew out his short sword and stared fiercely at the other person. The 2 of them blocked his escape route. What was it that they didn't want to kill him? He has already spared no effort. Even if he dies, he will kill someone to earn back his original value. Kid, I really don't want to live anymore. A soldier threw down his bow and arrow, shouted loudly, rushed forward, and fiercely stabbed Liu Jian with a spear. These two soldiers were cavalry patrols of Xiahou Yuan, originally from the Qingzhou army, with excellent training in fighting abilities. However, their military discipline was relatively lax, and killing and robbing during the chaos of war was a common occurrence in their families. If it weren't for the fear that the sound of horse hooves would startle Liu Jian and he would swim away, the two of them would have come riding horses and beheaded long ago. Although they were not riding horses at this time, they were still exceptionally fierce. Liu Jian dodged the stab, rolled forward, and swiftly approached the soldier, striking him in the calf with a fierce sword. Regardless of his past or present life, his body has been exceptionally agile. In this life, he is a young hunter with rich hunting experience, which accumulates in his mind like a subconscious. Whenever he encounters danger, it is naturally triggered. At a glance, he could tell that these two were cavalry, with looped legs and not agile enough to run around. He remembered that this was a common weakness among cavalry. His rapid illness left the soldier unguarded, and more importantly, his appearance was just that of a teenager, with both cavalry showing a hint of contempt. With a mournful scream, the soldier's right calf was cut off by a sword. Even Liu Jian did not realize that the short sword was so sharp. His astonishment only flashed by, and he immediately pounced like a tiger, flipping the soldier to the ground, wielding his sword and piercing it fiercely into the soldier's chest. He quickly turned around and stared at another soldier like a leopard, slowly wiping away the bloodstains on his face with the back of his hand. This was his experience in fighting wild beasts. After killing a prey, he couldn't have any attachment, otherwise he would die in the mouth of another wild beast. Another sergeant was more than 10 steps away, and he also realized that it was too late to save him. Liu Jian killed too quickly and did not give him a chance. The two faced off, their eyes fixed on each other without blinking, and no one dared to launch an attack easily. The soldiers of the Chao army had drawn out their swords, one with a spear and the other with a battle knife, balancing their lengths. Liu Jian suddenly bent down to pick up the spear of the dead soldier. The two of them were like taut strings, and any slight change in one person would immediately trigger the other's attack. The sergeant let out a loud roar and threw a fierce spear, directly stabbing Liu Jian. Then he pounced forward with a sharp blow. Liu Jian bent down to pick up the spear, which was just a feint move, to trigger the opponent to attack first. It was like triggering a wild beast to pounce. He pretended to pick up the spear, but his body rolled forward, avoiding the opponent's flying spear. He jumped up and stabbed the opponent's thigh from the side. This sergeant from the Chao army is a very tall and 8 foot tall, with a long tiger back and a bare waist. He is much more powerful than the soldier who was killed just now. With one strike, he knew something was wrong. But he was not panicked. The blade flashed and struck horizontally, hitting the short sword in Liu Jian's hand and flying it out. However, Liu Jian threw someone else to the ground. Liu Jian pressed him to the ground, pressed one of his hands with his knees, grabbed his ear, and pressed his head tightly against the grass, while the other hand of the two competed in the air. As time passed, Liu Jian suddenly faintly heard the roar of a warhorse in the distance. He was very anxious, and his eyes tilted to find that the man in white had already sat up, staring blankly at them from over 20 steps away. "You idiot, come and help me!" Liu Jian shouted anxiously. In the moment when he was distracted, Chao Junshi let out a roar and grabbed his neck, almost suffocating him with immense force. At the same time, Liu Jian also caught an arrow on the ground and thrust it fiercely into the opponent's face. Chao Jun let out a scream, desperately trying to squeeze his throat. The two were competing to see who could kill the other first. Liu Jian went crazy and aimed arrows at his eyes and forehead. Chao Jun choked and his hands gradually loosened. At this moment, someone from dozens of steps behind shouted, "Over there." Lu Jian jumped up from Chao Jun's body, grabbed his skin bag from the ground, picked up his short sword, stumbled and ran forward a few steps, jumped into the river, swam across the other bank a few times, and ran towards the depths of the forest in a desperate manner. The man in white also got up in fear and ran with him. "Young master, wait for me." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Heavenly Bets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Heavenly Bets. As the day gradually brightened, the sunlight shone into the forest. Lu Jian, who was hiding on a big tree, slowly opened his eyes. His throat was sore, and he couldn't help but think of last night's incident. Last night's battle against two Chao soldiers was his most thrilling encounter since coming to this era, even surpassing being driven to attack the Yellow Turban Army. If it weren't for the two soldiers of the Chao army who initially underestimated their carelessness, they would definitely not have been their opponents and would have died without a doubt. Looking back now, I feel a wave of fear in my heart. He thought of the skin bag again. Lu Jian suddenly sat up and took the skin bag hanging from the tree behind him. It was for this skin bag that he almost lost his life. He didn't know if the things inside were worth his hard work. First, he took out the short sword, which had no scabbard. He simply wrapped it in a piece of cloth and took out a heavy small square box from his leather bag. The box was carved from high-quality golden enamel, with various floral patterns and exquisite designs. Lu San was immediately excited. Could it be that there was some precious golden pearl inside the box? He almost held his breath and carefully opened the box. Inside the box, he used golden brocade as an inner cushion. The brocade was tied in a knot, tied to something, and untied the brocade knot. Inside was a bronze official seal with a turtle button, square and flat, only the size of a fist. It turned out to be the official seal, but Lu Jian felt a bit disappointed. He looked at other items, including a letter and a roll of bamboo slips, which had nothing of value. This was actually the seal of the Marquis, and he took a deep breath before realizing that the identity of the group of people who were killed yesterday was not simple. Lu Jian couldn't help but look up at a large stone under the tree, and saw the man in white sitting on the stone, staring blankly at the sunrise. It seems like he just sat there before dawn, with a heavy heart, but Lu Jian could understand that all the people accompanying him had died, and he must be very sad in his heart. Lu Jian jumped off the tree and slowly walked up to him, placing his skin bag on a large stone beside him. "I'll give it back to you." "It's useless to me," he said. The man in white sighed, "Everyone is dead. What's the point of giving him that?" "Thank you very much, little brother." The man in white took out a letter and bamboo slips from his leather bag. The letter was written on fine hemp paper, opened and looked at it again, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He had promised his lord that he would definitely bring Prince Jing back to Xiangyang. Now that the person is dead, how should he go back to the main bus to represent him? "It's my grandfather's younger brother, who is also the Jingzhou herdsman." In consideration of Lu Jian's rescue, the man in white did not conceal it. Oh. Lu Jian finally understood that he was referring to Lu Biao as Lu Zhoumu, but he was still a bit strange. Lu Biao's younger brother should be at least 40 or 50 years old. The person in the ox cart is clearly a teenager. The one who died on the ox cart yesterday is your lord's younger brother. No, it's his son, who is my lord's nephew. The man in white sighed and said, "I was ordered by my lord to go to his hometown in Shanyang County and take him to Xiangyang. I didn't expect to be killed by the cavalry patrol of the Chao army last night." Sigh. Nephew. Lu Jian suddenly realized that the young man was Lu Biao's nephew and was killed by Chao Jun halfway through, which was truly unexpected. Lu Jian sighed and asked again, "What do you plan to do now?" "What else can I do? I have no face to see my lord. I can only abandon my wife and children and flee to the ends of the earth." After finishing speaking, the man in white stood up and bowed deeply to Lu Jian, I am under Wu Xiu in Jingzhou, and I am very grateful for the young master's help. If there is a chance in the future, I will definitely repay the young master. After finishing speaking, he picked up his leather bag and turned to leave, but Lu Jian stopped him and said, "Please stay." The man in white turned around and asked, "Is there anything else, young master?" Lu Jian glanced at the sword hilt exposed outside his skin and smiled, "If that short sword is useless, can you give it to me?" The sharpness of the short sword last night left an extremely deep impression on him. "Sure." The man in white handed him the short sword, and Lu Jian took it. "Thank you very much," he said. He was extremely fond of this short sword in his heart and waved it lightly. Unfortunately, the scabbard was lost last night and he had to go get a scabbard. "Young master, we will meet later." The man in white turned around and walked away, but as soon as he took 2 steps, a thought suddenly jumped out of his mind, "Young master." A boy of 14 or 15 years old, is this God saving himself? He suddenly turned back, widened his eyes, and looked up and down at Lu Jian. His figure was somewhat similar, and his age was also similar. "What's your name? Where are you from?" the man in white trembled and asked. "My name is Lu Jian, and I am a hunter in the mountains." "Your surname is also Lu." The man in white's eyes slowly lit up. This is really fate. Thinking of his wife and children at home, Wu Xiu gritted his teeth and suddenly made up his mind. He knelt down and bowed, "Jingzhou shoes." Will Wu Xiu pleads with the young master for something. He stared at Lu Jian with a pleading expression in his eyes. Lu Jian's mind moved, and he also thought of something, and his heart began to be eager. "What's up with you? Tell me. Please pretend to be my young master and go to Xiangyang with me." "Young master, you must forget your original name. Remember. Your name is Lu Jing, 16 years old, from Gaoping County, Shanyang County. You must be strict in your speech and not make any mistakes." On a mountain road heading north, Wu Xiu repeatedly taught some of the most important things. If this kid were exposed, his life would be in danger. Lu Jian smiled and said, "My name is Lu Jing. I remember, but I remember the Liu Bei character Jingsheng. Why isn't my name taboo?" "You cannot mention your uncle's name or taboo, you must remember this." Lu Jian saw that his attitude was very serious, and he also put aside his joking intent. He nodded and warned himself that Lu Jian was his name in his past life. He had already died, and his name in this life is Lu Jing. Wu Xiu's attitude began to be serious, and he said, "Your name is bestowed upon you by your uncle. He loves you very much, so he gave you the Jing character in his own calligraphy. You are a jade character, so you are called Jing." Lu Jian. "No. From now on, his name is Lu Jing." The first thing he needs to do is forget the name of Lu Jian from his past life. He silently reminds himself that if he wants to survive in the Three Kingdoms era, he must have an identity that belongs to this era. Liu Bei's nephew will seize this opportunity no matter what. He repeated his name in his heart, "Lu Jing, this is your new beginning." After pondering for a moment, Lu Jing frowned and said, "Actually, I think there are quite a few loopholes in this. For example, my parents always know me. What should I do with my family members? As soon as we meet, it's exposed. How should I deal with it?" Wu Xiu smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about these things. Your father passed away 7 years ago, and your mother passed away last year. That's why my uncle thought of bringing you to Jingzhou. As for the tribe, they all came to Jingzhou several years ago, and they may not even know you. Just have a similar appearance. Children must grow up." As he spoke, he handed the letter to Lu Jing again and said with a smile, "This is a letter your uncle wrote to him. However, your uncle kicked your mother and son out 2 years ago, and I don't know what he thought. Anyway, this letter hasn't been sent out, but it has been brought back. You can take a look for yourself." Lu Jing took the letter and carefully read it. The letter stated that his nephew's father had passed away early and his mother had passed away last year. Since his birth, he has not shown mercy and feels very guilty. This means that Liu Bei has never seen this nephew before and has not sent anyone to visit him, which is why he feels guilty. Lu Jing nodded silently, then took the bamboo slip and looked at it. It turned out to be his yuan slip, which is equivalent to a proof of identity for future generations. It has his birth chart and the name of his parents. This is given to Liu Bei to prove his identity. What about my accent? I don't know how different it is from my hometown's accent. Your accent is a bit like Mount Taishan County. Although there are still some differences, it's not a big problem. You can say that you have been studying in Mount Taishan. I know there are many schools there. In addition, I cover up for you nearby, which should be able to cope with it. I understand. But I still have a few questions. It's okay, just ask. We need to consider the details carefully to avoid any problems. By the way, there are also various etiquette and titles. I taught you last night, don't forget. The two of them talked northward along the way, and at this time they were still within the territory of Runan County, passing through Rangshan and walking more than 100 miles to enter the territory of Jingzhou. The county seat of Runan County is Enchanting County. About 200 miles north of Enchanting County, there is a hilly area with undulating terrain, about 100 zhang high. This hilly and mountainous area, which covers an area of dozens of miles, is called Rangshan. Lu Jing and Wu Xiu did not have mounts and walked slowly. They had not eaten anything for a day and a night, and were so hungry that they felt dizzy. Unfortunately, there was a wilderness around them, and even a wild rabbit could not be found. It was not until dusk that they finally saw Rangshan from afar. It was almost dark by now, and the two had just walked into a hill, preparing to find a place to feed overnight. Suddenly, a chirping sound flew over their heads, making a sharp sound. Seize them! Nearly 100 soldiers of the Yellow Turban Army ambushed on both sides of the road, killing them from front, back, left, and right. Before they could react, they surrounded them in groups, and dozens of bows and arrows were strung and aimed at them. With some experience, Wu Xiu quickly raised his hand and shouted, "We are just ordinary people, please don't hurt us." Nonsense! A village chief strode out and pointed his sword at the two of them, shouting sternly, "You must be the scouts of the Chao army. Get me arrested." At this moment, Lu Jing said calmly, "Uncle Lu is here. I am his nephew and I want to see him." Several soldiers of the Yellow Turban Army who were about to pounce stopped and turned around to look at the village chief. The village chief was taken aback and realized that it was actually the nephew of the Lu royal family. He hesitated for a moment and immediately whispered to one of the soldiers, who then left. Wu Xiu was surprised, was Liu Bei actually here? He came from Shanyang County, but passed by Runan County and did not know that Liu Bei had returned to Runan County. He never expected that Liu Bei would be here. If Liu Bei were here, things would be easier to handle. Lu Jing sneered secretly. If Liu Beijian were here, things would be troublesome. They would inevitably be attacked by Chao's army. He called himself Liu Bei's nephew, but he didn't want to be humiliated like Zongzi. At this moment, a great general rushed over on horseback, standing about 7.5 feet tall and nearly 40 years old, with a big beard. His arrival made the soldiers respectfully move away. This person is Liu Bei, the main general of the Yellow Turban Army in Runan. He and Liu Bei were killed and scattered by the Chao army. He had just fled to this place with more than 4,000 remaining soldiers and was preparing to search for Liu Bei again. However, he received news that Liu Bei's nephew had arrived. He thought it was Guan Ping, and Liu Bei sent him to search for them, so he galloped over on horseback. However, he found two strangers. Liu Bei was suddenly furious, and with a wave of his big sword, the snowy tip of his sword pressed against Lu Jing's throat. "Who are you? Do you dare to impersonate the emperor's uncle and nephew? Are you tired of living?" End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Resting the Dilemma. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 4. Resting the Dilemma. How do you know I'm not Uncle Huang's nephew? Lu Jing was not afraid and looked into Liu Bei's eyes. Since Liu Bei participated in the Yellow Turban Rebellion in the first year of Zhongping, he has been fighting in the north and south for more than a decade. He knows countless people and has rich life experience. Although he doesn't know if Liu Bei has any nephews, he knows how to see people. From Lu Jing's gaze, he sees a kind of confidence, a calm and composed demeanor that is different from ordinary people, which is a calm expression that ordinary impostors cannot achieve. How can you prove that you are the nephew of the emperor's uncle? Huang Shu studied under Lu Ji and became friends with Gong Xuanzan. In the early years of Zhongping, Huang Shu and Guan Zhang's second brother rose up in Zhuo County to resist the Yellow Turban Rebellion, repeatedly making military achievements. However, they were despised by the middle officials, resulting in no reward for their achievements and wandering aimlessly. They occupied the plains, saved Shuzhou, fought against the Chao bandits, were worshipped as Huang Shu and left general by the Emperor of Han, and conspired with Dong Cheng and others to obtain the imperial edict to eradicate the national bandits. Can these serve as evidence? Liu Bei stared at Lu Jing for a long time, then slowly withdrew his big sword and said coldly, "If you dare to impersonate me, I will cut you to pieces." Lu Jing smiled faintly and said, "Uncle Huang has been forced by the Chao army and is besieged on all sides. What good is it for me to impersonate his nephew at this time? Of course there will be benefits." Liu Bei saw that they were exhausted and waved his hand, saying, "Prepare a small tent for them, and give them another meatball. Young master, you still have a way to coax them. If they suspect you of being a scout of the Chao army, you will have to suffer a lot. Where else will there be meat rice?" Wu Xiu, feeling famished and cold, was munching on meat and millet rice while vaguely praising Lu Jing. However, Lu Jing appeared somewhat worried. He pretended to be Liu Bei's nephew on the spot. On the one hand, he wanted to make a living, but on the other hand, he didn't want to be treated as a spy of the Chao army, subjected to torture, and ultimately tied up. He needed to maintain his freedom and escape at any time. He lowered his voice and said, "We're full, let's escape while it's dark." "Why?" Wu Xiu was surprised. "We estimate that they have entered the combat zone. They are clearly defeated soldiers and are likely to be besieged by the Chao army again. Being with them is extremely dangerous, and we need to flee as soon as possible." Wu Xiu suddenly nodded repeatedly and said, "Young master, you have great vision. Anyway, fill your stomach first before we talk." Lu Jing was also extremely hungry. He picked up a bowl and took a big bite to eat. This was the first meat rice he had eaten during the Three Kingdoms period, but he didn't expect it to be horse meat rice. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Lu Jing tied his skin bag to his body and kicked Wu Xiu awake. "Let's go." Wu Xiu was not yet awake, and he got up in a daze and walked with him towards the outside of the tent. Lu Jing looked into the left corner and the big man who was monitoring them curled up under a tree and fell asleep. "Let's go." Lu Jing waved his hand and quickly ran towards the edge of the camp with Wu Xiu, who had just woken up. When he entered, he noticed a gap in the northeast corner of the camp, indicating that there was not much defensive force. The two of them rushed to the gap, and indeed their defense was lax. Dozens of guards were hiding in the corner and sleeping. They were overjoyed and ran towards the gap. Suddenly, Lu Jing held down Wu Xiu and squatted him down. "What's wrong?" Lu Jing rubbed his eyes and stared outside the camp. Under the dim moonlight, a group of black shadows were slowly approaching the gap in the camp. It was already dozens of steps away, and Lu Jing was so shocked that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. This was Chao Jun's plan to launch a surprise attack on the camp. He pulled up Wu Xiu and ran back, shouting, "The Chao army is here! The Chao army is here!" The shouting woke up the sleeping defenders, who also noticed any movement outside and immediately sounded the drums and gongs. When the piercing sound of copper gongs echoed inside the camp, causing chaos among the Yellow Turban Army. The Chow Army, who was preparing to launch a surprise attack outside, shouted and rushed towards them. The defending army rose up and counterattacked, with arrows pouring down like rain and rolling wood and stones falling. Liu Bei rushed out of the tent with a knife and shouted loudly, "All brothers, get up and fight. If the Chow army breaks through the camp, no one can survive." More than 4,000 soldiers from the Yellow Turban Army rushed to the front of the camp. The camp was built along the mountain and the terrain was dangerous. As long as the defense was proper, the Chow army could not enter for a while. At this point, the Yellow Turban Army had no way out and had to fight back, gradually boosting their morale. They fought hard to kill the enemy, and the sneak attack on Chow's army suffered heavy casualties, leaving behind more than 200 corpses and retreating in a disheveled manner down the mountain. At this moment, drums were playing loudly at the foot of the mountain, and flames were blazing from all sides. A Chow army of thousands of people rushed towards the north, which was General Gao Lan's army, while another army from the south came to kill them. The leader was General Eugene, who was the commander-in-chief of this army of over 10,000 Chow soldiers. Upon hearing that the surprise attack was unsuccessful, Eugene couldn't help but become furious. "How dare the Yellow Turban thieves bully me? Give me 3 attacks." The drums of the Chow army resounded loudly, and 10,000 Chow soldiers launched an attack on the camp from 3 directions: north, south, and center. Soldiers rushed towards the camp like a tide, and fire arrows shot at the camp like wildfire. "Young master, let's run from the back mountain." Wu Xiu had never experienced such a big battle before, and was frightened to the point of trembling. He tightly held on to Lu Jing, afraid that he would leave him and run away. Lu Jing had no intention of running away from the back mountain at this time. He had just experienced a rapid escape 2 days ago and unexpectedly fell into a melee. Although he had no experience in war, his mind was clear that the Chow army must have sealed off the back mountain, and escaping was also a dead end. "We have no way out except to hope that the Yellow Turban Army can persist." Lu Jing let out a bitter smile, realizing that the situation was even more severe than he had imagined. In the midst of the melee, not to mention Liu Bei's nephew, even pretending to be Cao Cao's father was useless. "What should we do? Are we going to die here?" Wu Xiu said with a mournful tone, almost crying out loud. Lu Jing gave him a disdainful glance. He had originally thought that this scholar was good, knowledgeable and reasonable, daring to impersonate Liu Biao's nephew, and had some courage to do great things. But when death came, his timidity and fear of death were exposed on the other side. Lu Jing saw through this person, and he made himself pretend to be Liu Biao's nephew just to give Liu Biao an explanation, afraid that Liu Biao would punish him. In fact, he didn't have much courage, he was just a cowardly little person at heart. Lu Jing was really annoyed in his heart. He broke free from Wu Xiu's hand and said coldly, "No one wants to die now, but if we really want to die, it's also fate. What's so scary?" He ignored Wu Xiu and strode towards the camp. The battle in front of the camp was extremely fierce, with the Yellow Turban Army occupying advantageous territory. Wood and stones rained down like hail, repeatedly repelling the Chow army. Hundreds of soldiers held cloth soaked in water, and when the Chow army rocket entered, they immediately rushed forward to extinguish it. Although the Yellow Turban Army fought bravely and had high morale, Liu Bei was worried and stood under a tree staring blankly into the distance. "What is the general worried about?" Lu Jing walked up and asked with a smile. Liu Bei sighed and said, "I'm afraid that the Chow army will be besieged. The army has run out of food and can only kill horses to satisfy hunger. If the Chow army is besieged for 5 days, we will all be finished. Has the general not considered surrendering?" Liu Bei shook his head and said, "I heard that Cao Cao issued a killing order this time, and all the Yellow Turban Army in Runan were killed. Surrender is also considered death. Speaking of which, Liu Bei patted Lu Jing heavily on the shoulder and smiled, whether you are the nephew of Uncle Huang or not, I still want to thank you tonight. If it weren't for you discovering Chao Jun in time, we would all be finished. Lu Jing's face lit up as he knew that Liu Bei had actually seen through him. If he were really Liu Bei's nephew, he wouldn't have thought of running away in the middle of the night. What are the general's plans? I want to break through and return to Anqing County first. If I can't, I'll head south. Lu Jing shook his head and said, Anqing County has been conquered by Xiahou Yuan's iron cavalry. General Gong's entire army has been destroyed. I encountered him on the road, and it is impossible for General to go south. I advise General to hold on to the camp until Uncle Liu comes to rescue him. Liu Bei heard that Anqing County had been destroyed, and Gong Du's army had been completely destroyed. His face turned pale, and this was his last hope, but it was also shattered. Uncle Liu is too busy to care about himself, where else can he care about me? Liu Bai's thoughts turned to ashes, and he walked wearily towards the camp. Lu Jing followed behind him and said, General, Uncle Liu will definitely come and save us. Is it because his nephew is here? Said Liu Bei with a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. No. Lu Jing said urgently, if he doesn't come to save us, he won't be Uncle Liu. General, guarding the camp is our only way of survival. Liu Bei stopped and pondered for a moment before saying, perhaps you are right. Uncle Liu's benevolence and trust are spread throughout the world. If he doesn't come to save me, he will lose his trust in the world. Liu Bai's spirit was once again uplifted, and he bowed gratefully to Lu Jing. Thank you very much, young master, for dispelling doubts. Liu Bei almost missed a big deal. He shouted loudly, guard the camp for me. If the camp is broken, no one can survive. The Chao army's 5 attacks were all repelled by the Yellow Turban army using the favorable timing and location, resulting in more than 1,000 deaths and injuries. Although Yu Jin's eyes were filled with anger, he had no choice but to order the withdrawal of the attacking army and attack the camp at night, which was indeed very disadvantageous to them. At this moment, Gao Lan hurriedly arrived with 2 Yellow Turban army prisoners of war and said, General, this is the enemy patrol we have captured. We have good news. What good news? Eugene glared angrily at the 2 prisoners of war and asked. Gao Lan kicked 2 Yellow Turban army prisoners of war to kneel on the ground and said, speak up. A prisoner of war from the Yellow Turban army trembled and said, the food supply in the camp has been cut off, and we can only rely on killing horses to make a living. At most, we can last for 5 days. The news made Eugene's eyes squint. He pondered for a moment before Gao Lan approached and said, since the enemy's food supply is cut off, why not surround them? Eugene shook his head and said, Liu Bei has already fled to the west. The Prime Minister has only given us 2 days, and I don't want to wait any longer. He resolutely issued the order, pass on my command, the army will immediately withdraw. At dawn, the Yellow Turban army unexpectedly discovered that the Chao army had evacuated. The camp was filled with cheers, and Liu Bei was overjoyed. He immediately ordered, the army is coming down the mountain and retreating eastward. Upon hearing the order to go down the mountain, Lu Jing felt extremely anxious and rushed to Liu Bai's side, shouting, General, this is the tactic of Chao's army to lure troops. Going down the mountain will destroy the entire army, and we cannot evacuate. We should send someone to send a letter to Uncle Huang for help. Liu Bai's food supply has been cut off and he doesn't want to kill horses anymore. At this moment, he didn't listen to Lu Jing's advice and said angrily, who the hell are you? How dare you disturb my military morale? If you dare to say one more word, I will kill you. Lu Jing didn't expect him to turn his face so quickly. After a while, he could only sigh and say, all right. Wishing General a smooth journey. Liu Bei sneered and said, you pretend to be Uncle Huang's nephew. Do you want to run now? Dream. He shouted around, tie these 2 people together and bring them to Uncle Huang for punishment. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Frontline of Life and Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Frontline of Life and Death. Young master, it's not that I'm talking about you. You shouldn't have gone to find him. He's a yellow scarf thief, so there's no need to talk about credibility. We're both caught now, and our lives are in danger. Lu Jing and Wu Xiu were both bound by their hands and feet, side by side on a horse. Wu Xiu was filled with resentment and chattered incessantly. However, Lu Jing bit his lips and remained silent, his gaze occasionally glancing at the man who was escorting them. The leather bag containing evidence such as a copper seal was on the man's back. The Great Han was illiterate and did not know Lu Jing's true identity, but he was very interested in that short sword and was wielding it in his hand. Judging from his expression, he had decided to take it as his own. Young master, what should we do now? We can't go back to Jingzhou, we may die in the hands of the Chao army. Wu Shiyue thought more and more sadly, and burst into tears. Lu Jing turned around and gave him a fierce glare. Wu Xiu was so scared that he couldn't cry anymore. He also felt strange in his heart. Why did the young master remain silent? At noon, a warhorse ran from a distance and the cavalry shouted, "General, take a break." The soldiers all sat down to rest, escorting Han to dismount Lu Jing and the others, throwing them aside and fiercely saying, "Give you a rest, and continue to mount later." The big man sat on the other side and went to play with his new short sword. Seeing no one paying attention to him on either side, Lu Jing spat out a piece of sword tip from his mouth, which made Wu Xiu's eyes widen. It turned out that this was the reason why he remained silent. "Hurry up and cut the rope for me, Chao Jun is coming to kill me right away." Lu Jing understood in his heart that he had only walked more than 20 miles before stopping, so he must have discovered something. "So. What about me? Don't talk nonsense, cut it off for me quickly." Lu Jing cursed softly, and the two of them were back to back. Wu Xiu picked up the tip of his sword with both hands and used his sharp blade to cut the rope for Lu Jing. Collapse. The rope was cut off, and at that moment, a riot suddenly came from ahead. A soldier shouted loudly, "The Chao army is here." I saw Chao's army coming from all directions, completely blocking all the retreat routes of Liu Bei's army. There was no advantage in the terrain, and the soldiers of the Yellow Turban army immediately became chaotic. Liu Bei regretted it and had to grit his head and shout, "Don't be afraid, follow my command, fight to the death." The army was in chaos and the situation was extremely dangerous. Lu Jing flipped over and hid behind Wu Xiu, snatching the tip of his sword from his hand. At this moment, the Han who was escorting them quickly walked up, grabbed Wu Xiu, and released him towards the horse. This only opportunity was seized by Lu Jing. He quickly cut the rope on his feet, pounced on it, grabbed the big man's hair, and forcefully collided with the saddle. At this time, it was not a bridge-shaped saddle, but a cylindrical saddle with iron rings on both sides. Bang! With a muffled sound, the big man's head slammed heavily against the iron ring, and blood gushed out from his forehead. The big man let out a scream and covered his forehead with both hands. Seizing the opportunity, Lu Jing snatched the short sword from his hand and fiercely stabbed it into his heart. The big man fell limply to the ground, and Lu Jing quickly cut the rope on Wu Xiu's hands and feet. He then snatched the leather bag from the back of the big man and carried it on his own body. At this point, the Chao army had already entered the Yellow Turban army from all directions. The soldiers were enraged and ran around, being slaughtered like cattle and sheep, with screams echoing through the fields. "Young master, what should we do?" Wu Xiu's voice trembled with fear. "You idiot, get on the horse and run." Lu Jing doesn't know how to ride a horse, but Wu Xiu knows how to ride and can take him to escape. Although this is an old horse, as long as he drives it crazy, he may be able to escape. At this time, the warhorse did not have stirrups, but there was already a single side stirrup for mounting the horse, with both feet wrapped in ropes on both sides. Wu Xiu was weak all over and couldn't get on the horse even a few times. Just then, several arrows roared and hit the old horse. The old horse let out a long hiss and fell to the ground and died. Dozens of soldiers from the Chao army rushed towards this direction. Lu Jing grabbed Wu Xiu, turned around, and ran out about a mile. In the chaos, taking advantage of the unpreparedness, Lu Jing suddenly threw himself into the pile of corpses, wiping his face and body with blood. "Hurry up, don't daydream." Lu Jing cursed softly. Wu Xiu finally realized and grabbed the blood from the ground, wiping it on his body and face. "Young master. This way, you can escape your life," he said. "I don't know either. Let's take it for a while." Lu Jing knew that the Chao army was surrounded on all sides, and unless there were horses, running out would be death. Even if there were horses, they were useless. Under the chaos of arrows, they could not survive either. If the Chao army did not clean the battlefield, perhaps they could escape by pretending to be dead. But it's impossible to think about it. Chao Jun would eventually burn the bodies to prevent the outbreak of the epidemic. Lu Jing felt despair for the first time in his heart, and he didn't know if he could escape this time. The war has gradually come to an end, and dozens of war horses are galloping towards him. The war horses are standing next to Lu Jing, and the general on horseback is Gao Lan. He had a human head tied under his horse's head, which was Liu Bei, the leader of the Yellow Turban Army bandit. He had been killed by Gao Lan, staring at him with eyes wide open and dying without closing his eyes. Drops of blood dripped from his neck, right on top of Lu Jing's head, which was chilling. Gao Lan shouted loudly, "Check the battlefield, all the Yellow Turban soldiers who pretend to be dead will be executed." Lu Jing's heart sank. This time his life was really in danger, and he still hoped to seek Liu Biao's family business. All his dreams were shattered. At this moment, there was suddenly a commotion in the northwest corner, and a soldier shouted, "Liu Bei's army is coming." In despair, Lu Jing saw another glimmer of hope and secretly looked up to see a team of hundreds of people charging into the Chao army. They held up a yellow flag with black letters and wrote a big letter, "Lu," on it. It was really Liu Bei's army who had killed them. Lu Jing sighed inwardly, but unfortunately they arrived one step late. Liu Bei had already been killed. If they knew this news, they would definitely evacuate immediately. But Liu Bei's army had too few troops and was quickly dispersed by the Chao army. The leading general was fearless and charged alone in the Chao army, causing the Chao army to turn upside down. Wherever he passed, the soldiers of the Chao army were all frightened and fled in panic. Gao Lan was extremely angry and said, "What kind of person, alone, is that so fierce?" "General, it seems to be Zhao Yun." "Zhao Yun." Lu Jing's heart lit up, and he seemed to see a glimmer of vitality again. At this moment, a long howl came from afar, and the sound became louder and louder, like an owl dragon going out to sea. Under the sunshine, a white-robed silver spear general rushed from a distance, wielding a silver spear in his hand. His horse, Gao Jun, was as brave as a dragon in his crotch, as if soaring through clouds and mist, blocking the path of Gao Lan and the Chao soldiers. The commander was Zhao Yun, who, on behalf of Liu Bei, came to rescue Liu Bei, but arrived one step late. "Where is Liu Bei?" Zhao Yun shouted loudly from dozens of steps away. Gao Lan sneered, "Isn't it right under my horse?" At a glance, Zhao Yun saw Liu Bei's head and couldn't help but be furious. He urged his horse to rush forward, and dozens of Chao army cavalry rushed forward, stabbing Zhao Yun with spears and surrounding him in groups, front, back, left, and right. Zhao Yun's warhorse galloped, his spear fluttering like a pear blossom. In an instant, dozens of Chao army cavalry were killed by him in disarray, with corpses scattered everywhere. 2 soldiers fell off their horses, got up, and ran away. Zhao Yun leaped a vertical warhorse over the heads of 2 soldiers and killed them with a backhand silver gun. The two soldiers were stabbed in the throat. As soon as the long spear was withdrawn, a bolt of lightning pierced Gao Lan, shouting like thunder and lightning, "Rebel leader thief, take a shot at me, Zhao Yun." Gao Lan let out a loud roar and swung his sword towards him, with a powerful and swift force that was as fast as lightning. Zhao Yun took a silver spear and swiftly opened Gao Lan's sword, but the spear did not stop. With the momentum of the warhorse, it charged towards Gao Lan's face. Gao Lan swung his sword into the air, and the sharp spear head was in front of him. He was frightened and his soul was scattered. His head quickly flashed to the left, cha. With a loud sound, the tip of the gun brushed against his face, cutting open a long groove of blood. His right ear was kicked halfway, and blood spurted out. Before he could react, Zhao Yun's warhorse had already rushed past him. In this moment of lightning and lightning, Zhao Yun swung his single gun, and the head of the gun hit him hard in the back. This was one of Zhao Yun's unique skills. Spear hammer, using the head of the gun as a hammer to break the opponent's spine with strong force. Gao Lan felt a strong wind coming from behind, and he felt a chill in his heart. At this moment, he had nowhere to hide, so he had to turn his knife back. With a piercing sound, the gun head hit Gao Lan's knife shaft heavily. The hammer from the gun head had a force of at least 100 pounds, and Gao Lan's tiger mouth cracked. The big knife came out of his hand, and the scales and iron armor blades of the fish were slapped and flew everywhere. Gao Lan let out a loud cry, spewed out a mouthful of blood, and his bones were almost shattered. However, he was an experienced battlefield general, and with this pulling force, he fiercely grabbed his warhorse and fled without a trace in a moment. In fact, Gao Lan's martial arts skills are also very strong, and he can fight Zhao Yun for at least 10 rounds. However, Zhao Yun was furious and exceptionally brave, while Gao Lan's single sword horse was flustered in his heart, and his martial arts performance naturally declined. This one move and one contraction made it difficult for him to match Zhao Yun. The battle between Zhao Yun and Gao Lan had only one face-to-face encounter, with ups and downs, and ended in an instant. However, the heart-wrenching nature of the battle left Lu Jing stunned. Zhao Yun's speed, strength, and tragic outcome made Lu Jing so nervous that he couldn't even breathe. He slowly sat up, staring blankly at the famous general who had been around for generations. At this moment, a strong desire surged in his heart that Lu Jing would also become such a fierce general. Zhao Yun restrained his warhorse and glanced at Lu Jing and Wu Xiu. They both had bloodstains on their faces, but their attire did not resemble that of the Yellow Turban Army. He didn't have much time to ask, so he said, "Run quickly. Pretending to die means you can't escape the slaughter." He turned his horse's head to leave, and Wu Xiu hurriedly said, "General, this is the son of Lu Zhou, the governor of Jingzhou. We are in trouble here. Please save our lives. The governor of Jingzhou will surely give us great thanks." Zhao Yun was taken aback for a moment, but then shook his head and said, "I can't save you. You guys go quickly." He urged the horse to run, and as soon as he took a dozen or so steps, Lu Jing shouted, "General Zilong, do you really want to leave us alone?" Zhao Yun's body shook slightly, but he didn't stop. He ran for more than 100 steps, but he led 2 war horses and ran back. He gave Lu Jing a deep look and said, "Get on your horse and follow me out." Wu Xiu was overjoyed that he was going to save them. He quickly flipped over and got on his horse, grabbed the reins. Seeing that Lu Jing had not moved, Zhao Yun frowned and said, "Why don't you get on your horse?" Lu Jing has learned some basic horse riding skills, but when asked to gallop, he doesn't have the ability to control the horse. Lu Jing sighed and said, "You go." "I don't know how to ride a horse, it will affect you." "Young master, we can ride a horse together," Wu Xiu said on the sidelines. Zhao Yun did not adopt this plan. He urged his horse up and grabbed Lu Jing with one arm, pulling him up and placing him behind his horse. "Hold on to my waist." Zhao Yun urged his horse to run quickly. He understood in his heart that only his own warhorse could carry 2 people and run quickly, while other horses carrying 2 people could not run fast and would instead drag him down. However, Lu Jing did not hug his waist, but instead used his legs to clamp the horse's belly and leaned against Zhao Yun's back to secure his body. He took off the round shield from Zhao Yun's back and held a short sword in one hand. Lu Jing is actually smarter than anyone else. If he hugged Zhao Yun's waist tightly, wouldn't he become a target of flesh? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Chasing All the Way. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Chasing All the Way. General Eugene heard that Zhao Yun was in the army and was secretly pleased. He attacked a mountain fortress last night, resulting in nearly 2,000 deaths and injuries. He was worried that he could not represent the main bus. If he could capture Zhao Yun, perhaps he could redeem himself. At this moment, he made up his mind and immediately ordered, "Capture Zhao Yun alive." Soldiers from the Chao army rushed in from all directions, and Zhao Yun was not afraid. With a flick of his silver spear, he stormed into enemy groups, causing everyone to turn upside down wherever he passed. But with the 2 of them, Zhao Yun did not love to fight or rush towards the dense enemy group. He tried to find fewer people to break through. Behind him, Wu Xiu tightly hugged the horse's neck and constantly urged the horse to follow Zhao Yun closely. Zhao Yun was meticulous and never left danger behind, so Wu Xiu was basically not attacked. But it was precisely in this way that Zhao Yun's danger increased several times. Many of the enemy forces he could have ignored were threatened by them, and he had to rush forward to deal with them, which made his situation exceptionally dangerous. At this moment, Lu Jing played a role. Although he was not good at horseback riding, he was agile and used his shield to block the danger of cold stabs on the left and right, and helped Zhao Yun resolve it several times. "General, be careful of any obstacles ahead." Lu Jing's eyes were sharp, and he noticed several tight ropes on the ground, but Zhao Yun did not see them. He was startled and lifted the reins of the warhorse. The warhorse leaped up and crossed several stumbling ropes, and the long spear lifted them in the air, flying them away without affecting the horses behind. The warhorse galloped away, causing Zhao Yun to break out in a cold sweat. He was not afraid of a fair and straightforward battle, but also of such an undefended plot. "Thank you very much, young master." He expressed his gratitude to Lu Jing for the first time. Lu Jing felt a bit proud and said, "I'm not useless either." The young master has a keen reaction and is skilled in practicing martial arts. I suggest that he learn martial arts and achieve success. Lu Jing chuckled and said, "With the words of Zhao Zilong from Changshan, Lu Jing, have decided to learn martial arts. But you need to learn how to ride a horse first." Both of them burst into laughter, and Zhao Yun regained his energy. He called out to Wu Xiu and urged his horse to charge towards the northwest corner. This was the last obstacle, and once they passed this hurdle, they were safe and sound. At the northwest corner, Eugene had been waiting for a long time. He took off his strong bow and reached for the arrow pot on his back. When he touched the arrow feather, he hesitated for a moment and reached out to another soldier, "Give me the medicinal arrow." The soldier took out a medicinal arrow and handed it to Eugene. Eugene strung the arrow and stared coldly at Zhao Yun, who was rushing towards him. He stood under a large flag and slowly drew the bowstring. At this moment, Zhao Yun shouted loudly and rushed into the enemy group. His silver spear flew like a pear blossom, and like 100 birds facing the phoenix. In an instant, more than 10 people were stabbed to death by him. The Chao army was so frightened that they let out a shout and retreated one after another. "You go first." Zhao Yun turned around and shouted loudly. Wu Xiu's face turned pale, his legs sandwiched between his horses, and he rushed out of the battlefield first, rushing towards the northwest direction. Zhao Yun swung his spear and stabbed more than 10 people in a row, blocking the chasing soldiers. At this moment, an extremely burly toothed general rushed towards him. With a flick of his hand, a spear flew towards Zhao Yun's right side, as fast as a swift shadow. Lu Jing saw this spear and raised his shield to greet him. Zhao Yun's corner of his eye caught a glimpse of Lu Jing's actions and was greatly surprised. He exclaimed urgently, "Don't force yourself. But it's already late, Pop." With a loud sound, the shield was shattered, and Lu Jing's arm seemed to be broken. He let out a painful scream, and the tremendous impact shook his body, causing him to fall off his horse. Zhao Yun picked up the spear with one hand and grabbed Lu Jing, who was about to fall off the horse, with his left hand. Eugene seized this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and with a release of the string, a cold arrow flew lightning fast from the left side, shooting straight at Zhao Yun's left chest. Zhao Yun was grabbing Lu Jing with his hand, unable to dodge anymore, so he had to slightly move away by 2 inches to avoid the danger. Puff! With a loud sound, the arrow hit Zhao Yun's left shoulder and he trembled all over, almost falling off his horse. Eugene was overjoyed and shouted, "Zhao Yun has been hit by an arrow, catch him." More than 1,000 Chao soldiers came from all directions to kill. At the critical moment, Lu Jing had already stabilized his body, and his left short sword fiercely stabbed the horse's buttocks, causing the warhorse to suffer pain. With all his strength, he rushed out of the battlefield and fled quickly in the northwest direction. Seeing that his efforts were in vain, Eugene became furious and shouted loudly, "Chase me, I want to see people in life, I want to see corpses in death." Hundreds of cavalry from the Chao army chased after them. The golden glow of the sunset is gradually disappearing, and the sky dyed red by the sunset has darkened. The winding mountains and forests have become a dark black. The night shrouded Rangshan, and the mountain path was quiet, with towering trees growing on both sides. The half-bright and half-dark moonlight shone through the saddle-shaped ridges and canyons, and the black shadows of the trees, rocks, and peaks were highlighted by the moonlight, making them particularly dark, dense, and gloomy. A rapid sound of horse hooves came from afar, appearing particularly clear on the quiet mountain road. Under the dim moonlight, an exhausted warhorse was carrying 2 people running desperately. The 2 of them escaped from the battlefield, Zhao Yun and Lu Jing. Wu Xiu and them were separated and nowhere to be found. They were chased by the Chao army and ran for more than 2 hours from the afternoon until the evening. Finally, their horses were no longer able to fight. At this point, the poison from Zhao Yunjian's injury had already been released, leaving him completely powerless and in a semi-unconscious state. This was a chronic poison that, although not immediately fatal, could make him lose any strength. The warhorse could no longer hold on and ran very hard. Suddenly, the warhorse let out a long hiss and fell heavily on the roadside, throwing Lu Jing and Zhao Yun more than a foot away. On the right side of the mountain path is a ravine that is more than 10 zhang deep, and on the other side is a slope full of bushes. The 2 of them were lucky enough to fall onto the soft bushes. Lu Jing only felt unbearable pain between his legs, and riding a horse required strong crotch strength. He was not good at this aspect. Although his whole body was in pain like falling apart, the situation was critical. He didn't care about the pain all over his body, so he quickly got up and ran to the side of the warhorse. The warhorse collapsed on the mountain path, convulsing all over, foaming at the mouth, and was no longer effective. Lu Jing shook Zhao Yun's shoulder again and said, "General Zhao, you must hold on." The blood on Zhao Yun's shoulder had stopped, and an arrow was inserted into his shoulder, faintly smelling the foul smell of blood. He was actually hit by a poisoned arrow. Lu Jing was a bit flustered, with a myriad of things to do, each one so urgent that he didn't know which one to start with. Suddenly, a fierce sound of horse hooves came from afar, indicating that the pursuers had arrived, and the sound was already hundreds of steps away. At the critical moment, Lu Jing calmed down instead. He turned around and ran to the side of the warhorse, vigorously lifting it towards the nearby mountain ditch. He lifted the hundreds of pounds of warhorse into a deep ditch and also threw some miscellaneous items on the ground into the ditch. Lu Jing rushed back and helped Zhao Yun, half carrying him and running towards the slope, where there was still a mountain path. The pursuers had chased dozens of steps away, and the horses were galloping. Unexpectedly, a team of cavalry rushed up the mountain path, blocking his escape route. There were pursuers on both the upper and lower mountain paths, and it was too late. Lu Jing had to carry Zhao Yun on his back and hide in a cluster of bushes, trying to lower his head as much as possible. The half-human tall bushes just covered them, causing Lu Jing's heart to jump out of nervousness. The intense sound of horse hooves was getting closer and closer, and in an instant, a gust of strong wind blew past them. They smelled a strong murderous aura, and a group of cavalry rushed by, quickly fading away. They waited for the cavalry to walk away before slowly lifting their heads. At this moment, Zhao Yun let out a painful groan, his arrow wounds burst, and blood flowed out again. Lu Jing quickly laid him down, placed his left arm in Zhao Yun's mouth, pulled out his short sword, and gritted his teeth to remove a large piece with arrows and flesh. Zhao Yun let out a muffled scream of pain, almost biting off Lu Jing's arm. Zhao Yun took a few heavy breaths and whispered, "I have a gold wound medicine in my arms." Lu Jing was overjoyed and suppressed the pain in his arm. He took out a package of medicinal powder from his arms and wrapped it thick around his wound. He also took out the brocade wrapped in the official seal from the skin bag and bandaged his wound. Zhao Yun's face turned pale and he appeared very weak. Lu Jing bandaged the wound and pondered for a moment. There was no water or clean cloth around him. He had to leave immediately, otherwise even if he wasn't caught, Zhao Yun would have died from poisoning. Lu Jing slowly helped Zhao Yun up. Seeing that he was very weak and difficult to walk, he decided to carry him on his back, run up the slope, and run towards the direction of escape. Zhao Yun is 8 feet 2 in height and has a strong physique. Lu Jing struggled to carry him on his back. He had just taken more than 20 steps when the sound of horse hooves came from ahead. Someone shouted, "General Zhao Yun, Lord Liu Bei is here." "Where are you?" Lu Jing was overjoyed. Liu Bei had arrived, and Zhao Yun's spirit was also boosted. It seemed like the voice of Mi Fang. He quickly whispered, "This is my lord coming." Lu Jing quickened his pace and ran forward. In the darkness, a group of cavalry faintly appeared ahead. At this moment, Lu Jing suddenly realized that something was wrong. How can the other party directly call their lord's name taboo? This is disrespectful, usually shouting, "General Zhao, here is the lord." That's enough, adding Liu Bei would obviously add a touch of embellishment. They are not Liu Bei, they are the deceitful tactics of the Chao army. Lu Jing stopped abruptly, but in the darkness, someone in front of him had already faintly seen his figure and shouted, "Who is that in front?" Lu Jing's face turned pale and terrible. His mind turned extremely fast and he released Zhao Yun into the bushes. "Hurry up and hide," he said. He turned around and ran. Zhao Yun exerted his last bit of strength and climbed into a cluster of bushes. The young man turned around and ran at a speed as fast as a cheetah. The cavalry behind him chased after him like a gust of wind. "Stop." Of course, Zhao Yun knew that the young man was trying to distract the pursuers to save him. He sighed inwardly, "This young man is finished, what a pity." Lu Jing had just taken 70 or 80 steps when an arrow brushed against his scalp and shot it. He stopped, and if he continued, he would undoubtedly die. At this moment, dozens of cavalry rushed over and surrounded Lu Jing in groups. General Eugene followed suit, and a cavalry soldier reported, "General Yu is a young man." Lu Jing saw Eugene for the first time. He wore an eagle-shaped helmet on his head, was clad in iron armor, and had a sturdy and majestic figure. He had deep eyes and a high nose, his gaze like lightning, and he held a golden-backed tiger-tooth sword in his hand. Eugene looked up and down at the young man. At that time, Lu Jing was behind Zhao Yun, with blood on his face and covered by Zhao Yun's body. Eugene did not notice him, while the other cavalry were all Eugene's own soldiers, watching from a distance and did not approach. More importantly, it was now at night, and most of the blood on Lu Jing's face had been washed away by sweat. For a while, everyone did not recognize Lu Jing. With a wave of his sword in his hand, Eugene pressed it against his throat and sternly shouted, "Who are you?" End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Enchanting Soup for Eugene. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Enchanting Soup for Eugene. Lu Jing forced herself to calm down and calmly bowed. "I am the nephew of the Lu Zhou herdsman in Jingzhou, and I am on my way to Xiangyang." Eugene frowned and said, "Lu Biao's nephew." Cao Cao's nephew. Eugene may show some respect, but Lu Biao's nephew is nothing to him. Eugene still had doubts in his heart. Lu Biao's nephew was so burly and sturdy, without any feeling of being a scholar. He still had blood stains on his body, like a yellow scarf thief. He suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed Lu Jing by the collar, forcefully pulling him in front of him. He stared at him fiercely and said, "Kid, you must be a fleeing yellow turban bandit army." Just as Lu Jing heard the soldiers call him General Yu, he guessed that this person might be Eugene. Seeing Jin's eyes revealing a killing intent, he became anxious and shouted, "Yu Wenzi, are you going to harm me?" The writing rules of Yu Ban's calligraphy are rarely known by ordinary people, and even many generals are not clear. Eugene was taken aback by how this young man knew his calligraphy. He couldn't help but loosen Lu Jing's collar. Eugene looked at Lu Biao's nephew again and saw that he was indeed a young man, 15 or 16 years old, but he was very tall and looked about 8 feet tall, with a very sturdy physique. "How do you know my name is Yu Wenzi?" Eugene asked coldly. "Of course I know." Lu Jing's mind suddenly turned, and he spoke loudly, "I have always admired the heroes of the world. I remember all the heroic deeds in my heart. General Yu was originally a general of Bao Xian's army, and he repeatedly made military achievements. He defeated Lu Bu's 2 camps in the south of the city, Gaoye and Xuchang, and killed Qiao Rui, a subordinate of Yuan Shu. The Battle of Wancheng was even more like that of Zhou Yafu, and was worshipped as the Marquis of Yishouting by Duke Chao. The 3 kingdoms are no different from later generations, with inconvenient transportation and limited information. The deeds of Cao Cao may be known to the world, and the achievements of people like Eugene may not be known to many people except for Cao Cao. However, the young man in front of him knows very well, which surprised Eugene greatly. Eugene withdrew his knife and looked strangely into his eyes, asking, "How could you understand my background?" Generally speaking, knowing a person's background is not good either. If one knows someone else's bad background, it is indeed easy to be disliked, but if one knows a good background, it is a disguised form of flattery. Although Eugene's attitude remained gloomy, what Lu Jing knew was all about his proud deeds. He couldn't help feeling a bit proud in his heart, and his tone softened slightly. Observing one's appearance and understanding one's mentality has always been Lu Jing's specialty. At this moment, he keenly noticed that Eugene's tone had also eased, and he had a sense of confidence in his heart. He heard Yu Ban's accent was a little similar to his, but Wu Xiu said he had an accent of Mount Taishan County, and he immediately had a solution. "I was from Gaoping County, Shanyang County. I had been studying in Mount Taishan for many years. I often heard of the deeds of Tu General, and I kept them in mind. When the general was fighting against Zhang Xiu in Wancheng, he suppressed Qingzhou soldiers and plundered people, and was told by Qingzhou soldiers to Chao Gong's account. However, the general built a camp to resist the enemy without losing his military appearance, which was quite similar to Zhou Yafu's style. He was granted the title of Longevity Pavilion Marquis, which made people all over the world admire. Although Eugene is not a person at the foot of Mount Taishan Mountain, he is indeed a native of Mount Taishan County. Lu Jing's explanation is reasonable, and he believed it in his heart. The key is to wear 1,000 pieces of clothing, not flattery. Eugene was already a very arrogant person, only hating that the world did not know about his deeds. Now, Lu Jing can talk confidently and repeatedly exaggerate his proudest act of building a camp in Wancheng. He has already felt extremely comfortable in his heart. Eugene had completely accepted his hostility, and even if it was a yellow-turbaned deserter, he didn't want to kill him. It was rare for a young man who knew him well. He chuckled and said, "Young Master Liu is truly extraordinary. He truly deserves to be Liu Jingzhou's nephew. Eugene admires him." At this moment, Liu Jing took out Liu Biao's family letter from his bag and gave it to him. Eugene took a look at the torch and found that he was indeed Liu Biao's nephew. At this time, Cao Cao still needed to win over Liu Biao to prevent him from forming an alliance with Yuan Shao. Eugene naturally knew not to offend Liu Biao too much. He nodded and said, "Okay. I'm bothering young Master Liu." Eugene waved his hand and said, "Get on your horse and continue chasing." He led the soldiers to continue chasing forward, and Liu Jinghan was drenched in sweat on his back. He was extremely lucky. He had already seen what Eugene had just meant and began to suspect him. Fortunately, he shouted out Eugene's words in time. If one sentence was wrong, Eugene would definitely order the soldiers to search around, and then he and Zhao Yun would really be finished. Although he flattered Eugene fiercely, which seemed to lack the toughness of a man, it was precisely the only useful method in a critical situation at that time, because Eugene did not suspect that Zhao Yun was hiding nearby, but out of an instinct to carefully question, and searching around was optional. The key was in the moment of the general's thought. Lu Jing used his little knowledge of the three kingdoms that he had pondered in later generations, as well as his quick wit and eloquence, to dispel the idea of carefully searching the surroundings and resolve this crisis. Seeing the prohibition of walking far away, he quickly ran back to the bushes and found Zhao Yun. Lu Jing carried him on his back and ran towards the mountain, only to find that he had just climbed the slope when a person flashed out from behind a large pine tree. Lu Jing was so scared that he took 2 steps back, drew his short sword, and stared at the other person with caution. "Young master, it's me," was the voice of Shuzuo Wu Xiu. Lu Jing let go of his heart and realized it was him. "How could you be here, your horse?" Lu Jing asked strangely. Wu Xiu lowered his head and didn't dare to look at Lu Jing. He said nervously, "I was thrown off my warhorse and it ran away. I had to hide on the mountain." Lu Jing was an extremely shrewd person in his past life, and Wu Xiu's strange expression could not hide it from Lu Jing's eyes. He thought about it and immediately understood a bit. The warhorse was probably deliberately let go and hid on the mountain. As long as the Chao army chased after him and Zhao Yun, they would withdraw their troops and return to the camp. He would be fine. He must have seen it from the side when he encountered danger just now. Lu Jing harbored a deep hatred in his heart. This person was extremely selfish. Although Zhao Yun saved his life, he only managed to escape for himself. Lu Jing was dissatisfied in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. Now we need everyone to work together, and Wu Xiu can help him take care of Zhao Yun. "Let's hurry up the mountain, I'm afraid Eugene will turn around and chase us," he said. Wu Xiu nodded and helped Zhao Yun up the mountain from a small path. Lu Jing's intuition is not wrong. Although the crisis of Eugene has been temporarily resolved, many things often suffer from small details that are not noticed, as if there is a divine will in the dark. Rushing out 3 or 4 miles, Eugene suddenly turned his horse and ran back. He had already regained his composure from flattery. How could Liu Biao's nephew be so easily let go? He should be handed over to the Lord for disposal. He led his army back to the original place, but Lu Jing was nowhere to be seen. He felt a bit strange in his heart. Where did this kid go? At this moment, a soldier found bloodstains in the bushes and shouted, "General Yu, there are bloodstains here." Eugene rushed forward and saw bloodstains scattered in the bushes. It was obvious that someone had been injured and had been hiding here. Eugene suddenly became furious and was fooled by this kid. It turned out that Zhao Yun was hiding here. He shouted loudly, "Search for me. Quickly, the soldiers discovered the bodies of war horses in the ravine, as well as Zhao Yun's spear. Eugene became even more furious, his eyes bloodshot, as if a demon had reincarnated. "Send my command, immediately mobilize 5,000 troops to search the mountains for me." At this point, Zhao Yun was no longer important. He swore to catch the boy who had fooled him and personally dismember him. He had never suffered such a great loss in his life. This mountain is a rocky one, about 100 zhang high, with thorns and various crevices and caves everywhere, making it easy to hide. However, it is not a solitary mountain, but a hilly area that stretches for dozens of miles, with more than 10 mountain peaks. If one really hides inside, it cannot be found with just a few thousand people. Lu Jing was worried about Zhao Yun's injury and didn't dare to walk too far. After a few hundred steps up the mountain, he found a stone cave. The dim moonlight shone into the cave, and it was very dry without insects or snakes. There were also signs of fire at the entrance, indicating that someone had lived before, probably a medicinal gatherer or a woodcutter. Lu Jing put Zhao Yun down and lay down, but Zhao Yun was still in a daze. At this moment, he suddenly heard click behind him. Click, the sound of it turned around and saw Wu Xiu striking a flint at the entrance of the cave to ignite it. Lu Jing was furious, and his dissatisfaction with Wu Xiu suddenly erupted in his heart. He rushed forward and kicked the hay and flint away, glaring angrily at Wu Xiu. "Are you crazy?" Wu Xiu was stunned for a moment before realizing it. He lowered his head in fear and said, "I forgot, it's my fault." Lu Jing restrained his anger and said to him, "Go outside and see if the Chao army wants to search the mountains." Wu Xiu nodded silently and went out. Lu Jing returned to Zhao Yun and took the kettle from beside him. This was the kettle from Wu Xiu's warhorse. This guy drank most of the water from the kettle, leaving only a little. Lu Jing gave Zhao Yun a few sips of water, and the water worked. Zhao Yun slowly woke up and looked gratefully at Lu Jing, whispering, "Thank you, young master, for risking your life to save us. General, you don't need to be polite. You were injured by an arrow because of me. It's only right for me to do my best." Lu Jing felt a bit guilty. In history, Zhao Yun was not injured. He was injured because he saved himself, which changed his life journey. If he died as a result, wouldn't it be without Zhao Zilong from Changbanpo? Lu Jing changed his medicine again and decided to give him the last few sips of water to drink. Is the young master really Lu Jingzhou's nephew? Let's just say it. Lu Jing smiled and said, as if endorsing, "I am Lu Jing, a native of Gaoping County, Shanyang County. I was summoned by my uncle, Jingzhou Pastor, to join forces in Xianyang and encountered the Chao army in Runan County. Unfortunately, my family died tragically, leaving me alone. It turned out to be Prince Jing, disrespectful." In the darkness, Zhao Yun smiled slightly, and his bright gaze became calm. At this moment, Wu Xiu's low shout came from outside the cave, "Young master! Young master!" His voice was very tense, and his tone had changed. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. A Heartbreaking Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. A Heartbreaking Night. Lu Jing lightly patted Zhao Yun's hand, got up, and walked outside the cave. "What's going on?" "Young master, look." Wu Xiu pointed to the foot of the mountain, feeling extremely frightened. Lu Jing followed his fingers and looked over, his heart sinking. He saw long rows of torches appearing on the mountain path, about several miles long, like a dragon, with tens of thousands of people. Countless torches had already moved up the mountain. This must be the main force of Chao's army, who wanted to search the mountain comprehensively. The spectacular momentum of tens of thousands of people scared Wu Xiu to a pale complexion and made his legs tremble. He couldn't help but turn around and plead, "Young master, this must be Cao Cao. I don't want to worry about him anymore. He will drag us down." With him, we won't be able to run away. Before he could finish speaking, Lu Jing punched him hard and knocked him to the ground, pointing at him and cursing angrily, "You ungrateful person. Without him to save you, you would have died in the chaos long ago. If you dare to speak nonsense again, I will kill you with one blow." Wu Xiu slowly lowered his head, with a hint of hatred in his eyes. If it weren't for his fear of not being able to explain when he went back, he would have run away long ago. Will he still come back to find this stinky guy? Lu Jing turned around and walked towards the cave, holding Zhao Yun's hand and laughing, "It seems we need to go somewhere else." Zhao Yun heard their conversation outside and was moved in his heart. He forced a smile and said, "Actually, Cao Cao wouldn't kill me. It's okay to be caught." However, Lu Jing ignored him and directly carried Zhao Yun on his back. "Let's go. I won't die, and you won't want to die either." He carried Zhao Yun out of the cave, and Wu Xiu led the way ahead. The three of them continued to climb towards the top of the mountain. On the mountain path, dozens of generals gathered around a middle-aged man with a foot-long beard under his jaw, a high nose bridge, and a pair of slender eyes with sharp eyes. He wore a golden helmet on his head, a golden chain armor, a heaven sword on his waist, and Huang Feidian's claws on his crotch. This person was Cao Cao, and Liu Bei had already fled far away. He couldn't chase after him and had to lead his troops back to Rangshan. However, he heard that General Zhao Yun was injured and hiding in the mountains, accompanied by a young man who turned out to be Lu Jingsheng's nephew. Cao Cao couldn't help but be very interested. It's not far from Jingzhou here. If he can catch Liu Biao's nephew, he can go to Hanshui to meet Liu Biao for a while under the pretext of seeing him off, and exchange Liu Bei for him. In front of Cao Cao's horse, Eugene knelt down on one knee. At this moment, he felt extremely regretful in his heart. He had known that the Lord valued the young man so much, and it would be great if he didn't let him go. He was truly foolish. He didn't dare to conceal it, so he repeated Lu Jing's words in their original form, feeling extremely frustrated and saying, "My humble position was drugged by him, causing him and Zhao Yun to run away right under my nose. It's too late to repent. My humble position is foolish and has caused harm to my lord. Please punish me, my lord." Cao Cao was somewhat surprised in his eyes. This young man not only had extensive knowledge, but also was bold and cunning, extremely wise. It was impressive that Lu Jingsheng had such a nephew, which made Cao Cao's interest even stronger. He must seize this nephew of Lu Jingsheng. He immediately ordered, "Send my command, no setting fire to the mountains, must be captured alive. Those who catch Zhao Yun will receive a reward of 300 pounds, and those who catch Liu Biao's nephew will receive a reward of 500 pounds. Cao Cao ordered General Li Dian, "You can lead 3,000 troops to take a small path and climb up the mountain from behind, cutting off their retreat to the south. Obey the order." Li Dian led 3,000 soldiers along the mountain road towards the southwest direction. Under the heavy reward, there must be brave men. Tens of thousands of soldiers from the Chao army climbed the mountain with torches in hand, and the entire slope was like a tree of fire and silver flowers blooming, especially spectacular. Lu Jing and his companions had already climbed over the mountain slope and arrived at the saddle on the other side, which was covered in pine forest. At this moment, Zhao Yun's poison began to attack, and he was in a semi-unconscious state, with a string of blisters on his mouth, sometimes confused, sometimes clear. When awake, remain silent, when confused, shout softly, "Water! Water!" He was scorching hot all over and was about to dehydrate. Lu Jing's heart was burning with anxiety. Zhao Yun urgently needed water and medicine, and the medicine was gone. At least there was water. If he didn't find water again, Zhao Yun would die. He stood up and looked around. He was originally a young hunter with some experience. It had just rained the day before yesterday, and there would be no water in the pine forest. However, in the saddle-shaped mountain depression, perhaps a puddle of water could be found. He took the kettle and said to Wu Xiaodao, "Take good care of General Zhao. He has saved our lives, and we must not leave him behind. I will go find the water, take it and come back." Wu Xiao nodded and said, "Young master, rest assured to go. I will take good care of him." Although Lu Jing was still worried, he had no choice but to quickly go back. He jumped off a soil ridge and ran towards the valley. Looking at Lu Jing's distant figure, Wu Xiao's face changed and became exceptionally fierce, with a fierce light in his eyes. "Kid, if you want to die, I don't want to die." He took out a dagger from his arms, which he found hidden in the leather bag of the warhorse he was riding. He kept it hidden on his back and walked step by step towards Zhao Yun. Lu Jing was very lucky. As soon as he ran more than 100 steps, he discovered a small puddle that had accumulated some shallow rainwater. He was overjoyed and quickly filled the kettle with water carefully. Unfortunately, there was too little water, and only a small half of the kettle was empty. Lu Jing knew that as long as he found one place, there would definitely be a second one nearby, but he didn't trust Zhao Yun and turned around to run away. Wu Xiao crouched in front of Zhao Yun, holding the back of his dagger tightly behind him, and whispered, "General Zhao. General Zhao." He witnessed Zhao Yun's superb martial arts skills with his own eyes, and his heart still felt uneasy. If Zhao Yun could resist, he would be dead. At this moment, Zhao Yun happened to be in a clear state. He slowly opened his eyes and asked in a low voice, "Where is Prince Jing?" "He went to search for water, I'll take care of you." After speaking, he lightly pressed on Zhao Yun's wound. Zhao Yun was in excruciating pain, but he gritted his teeth tightly without making a sound. "General Zhao seems to have been severely injured. Why don't I help you take 2 steps? Move your bloodline." Zhao Yun was very experienced. When he saw Wu Xiao's eyes shining with ferocity, his facial muscles deformed, and his appearance was ferocious, Zhao Yun immediately understood in his heart that this person had harbored evil intentions. Zhao Yunxin became anxious and immediately shouted in a low voice, "Prince Jing is behind you." Wu Xiao was taken aback and suddenly turned around. There was no one behind him, and there was no trace of Lu Jing. Wu Xiao's eyes showed a fierce smile, "So General Zhao was joking with me." At this point, he already understood that Zhao Yun had seen through him, but he also saw that Zhao Yun was powerless to resist. Wu Xiao grinned and said, "General Zhao, I'm sorry, I will burn more paper for you." He raised his dagger high, causing a mournful cry in Zhao Yun's heart. He did not die in battle, but rather died at the hands of a villain. At that moment, Zhao Yun's eyes suddenly lit up and he stared closely behind Wu Xiao. Wu Xiao sneered, "You can't deceive me anymore, go to hell." He was about to stab his dagger, but a severe pain came from his vest. He slowly lowered his head and found a blade protruding from his chest. Wu Xiao turned his head and realized that Lu Jing was standing behind him, staring at him with anger on his face. Wu Xiao raised his hand to point at Lu Jing and finally shouted desperately, "You're a fake." After shouting, Wu Xiao fell to the ground and died. Lu Jing drew his short sword from his vest and kicked him away in disgust. The body rolled around twice, but a paper bag fell out of his arms. Lu Jing picked up the paper bag and smelled it, his eyes suddenly lit up. It was actually a pack of high-quality gold and medicine, which this person had with him. Damn it! Lu Jing cursed. He couldn't find any medicine everywhere, which was why Zhao Yun's injury worsened. This bastard was clearly hiding the medicine, but refused to take it out. With the top-quality Jingsheng medicine, Lu Jing's heart was filled with hope. He quickly stepped forward to support Zhao Yun and asked with concern, "General Zhao, are you okay?" Zhao Yun whispered, "You saved my life again." "No." Lu Jing resentfully said, "Knowing people knows their faces but not their hearts. It was me who was blind and carried this venomous snake by my side, almost endangering the general's life." Lu Jing took the kettle and carefully gave Zhao Yun a few sips of water. He smiled and said, "The taste is probably not good due to the accumulation of rainwater. When I go to Xianyang City, I will buy fine wine to apologize to the general." Zhao Yun smiled slightly and said, "I'll treat you to a drink then." Lu Jing wrapped the wound medicine around Zhao Yun again, and the water and Jingsheng medicine quickly worked wonders. Zhao Yun's body temperature gradually returned to normal, no longer boiling hot, which greatly relieved Lu Jing's heart. At this moment, the sky seemed to brighten. Lu Jing turned around and saw torches covering both sides of the mountain. Chao's army took a small path up the mountain from behind, blocking his back path. Lu Jing let out a bitter smile, truly worthy of being Cao Cao. He likes to engage in such activities of copying people's backs. "Prince Jing, you go. Don't worry about me." Zhao Yun also realized that their situation was extremely dangerous, and he didn't want to implicate Lu Jing anymore. Lu Jing smiled and shook his head, "Don't say such things. You didn't leave me on the battlefield. How can I leave you now?" Zhao Yun silently looked at the young man, his nose filled with soreness. The young man was so passionate and righteous, how could he repay this kindness? After pondering for a moment, Lu Jing said to Zhao Yun, "At this point, I can only take a risk and try. Whether we can escape this calamity depends on our luck." Zhao Yun sighed lightly and said, "If we can die together on the battlefield with the young master, I, Zhao Yun, will die without regret." Lu Jing stood up and smiled, "Chao Jun wants to kill us, but it's not that easy." He looked around and saw that they were between two hills. Chao's army was mainly concentrated on the North Hill, and although there were soldiers cutting off their escape routes on the South Hill, their troops were not strong, especially in the southeast direction, with torches even sparser. "Brother Zhao, can you take a few steps?" Zhao Yun felt a slight sensation in his legs and nodded, "Let me give it a try." Lu Jing helped Zhao Yun up and then sandwiched Wu Xiu's body under his armpit. He held on to Zhao Yun and limped away towards the southeast direction. Lu Jing helped Zhao Yun walk along the mountainside for a while. At this moment, he discovered a cave that seemed unfathomable. Lu Jing picked up a stone and threw it down, and after a while, an echo came back. "This cave is good and can hide corpses." Lu Jing found a low-lying area next to it and smiled at Zhao Yun, saying, "Brother Zhao, lie down for a while, I'll be back soon." Zhao Yun lay down and closed his eyes. At this moment, he had handed over his honor and life to Lu Jing. Lu Jing covered the bodies of Zhao Yun and Wu Xiu with a tree branch, and after distinguishing the direction, he ran towards the southeast direction. The search soldiers of Chao's army in the southeast were not many, only about 300 people, mostly scattered, which gave Lu Jing the opportunity. About 200 steps away from the cave, Lu Jing found a lone soldier from the Chao army. He casually threw Zhao Yun's helmet onto the ground, drew his short sword, and climbed up the tree. Not long after, a soldier from the Chao army came over with a torch in hand. He found the helmet on the ground and bent down to pick it up. Just as he was looking at the helmet, Lu Jing jumped down from the tree, flipped the soldier to the ground, pressed his face tightly against the soil, and stabbed his vest with a sword. He quickly stripped off the armor of the Chao soldiers, put it on for himself, looked around, and saw another lone torch not far away. Lu Jing rushed away and quickly arrived not far from the soldiers of the Chao army. He hid behind a tree and waited for them to approach. Suddenly, he flashed out and pointed his knife at the chest of the Chao soldiers, shouting, "Command!" The soldiers of the Chao army were startled and saw that it was their own person. They quickly replied, "Close the net." Originally, the password was to collect the net, not chicken ribs. Lu Jing smiled and suddenly pointed behind him in fear, saying, "What is behind you?" The soldiers of Chao's army instinctively turned around, and Lu Jing seized an instant opportunity to strike fiercely, flying the opponent's head more than a foot away. At this moment, Lu Jing was extremely nervous in his heart. More searches of Chao's army were gradually approaching, and he didn't have much time. He picked up 2 corpses and turned to run towards the cave. 15 minutes later, Lu Jing carried Zhao Yun, who was also wearing the armor of the Chao army, with a torch in hand, and ran south along the mountainside. He was betting that these soldiers would never dream that their prey would fall into the trap. Several soldiers from the Chao army noticed him and shouted loudly, "Who is it?" "The command. Close the net." Lu Jing was like entering a password, anxiously waiting for the other party's reply. Obviously the password was correct. A few soldiers from the Chao army walked forward and, led by Shi Chang, looked at Zhao Yun and asked with concern, "What's wrong with him? It seems like he's almost exhausted." Lu Jing let out a bitter smile and said, "He's my older brother. He was bitten by a snake while searching the mountains, and the snake venom broke out. It's useless to let him bleed. I need to see a military doctor immediately." Just then, a commotion came from a distance, and someone faintly shouted, "Found it." The soldiers of the Chao army suddenly became anxious, ignoring Lu Jing and the others. They left them and rushed towards the commotion, which was a reward of 800 pounds. The urgency of getting rich made the soldiers' eyes turn red. In a moment, all the soldiers of the nearby Chao army ran away. Seeing that there were no more torches blocking the way ahead, Lu Jing carried Zhao Yun on his back and smiled, "Brother Zhao, we can start our journey now." Zhao Yun also smiled and said, "It seems that we don't need to die in battle anymore." The two of them laughed heartily, and Lu Jing took big steps towards the wild mountains in the south. At the foot of the mountain, General Lejin and Li Dian knelt down on one knee in front of Cao Cao. Lejin felt extremely ashamed and said, "I have searched the mountain back and forth twice, every corner has been searched, and there is no trace of them. Only 2 corpses have been found, one is a middle-aged man, the other is our brother, wearing Zhao Yun's armor." The soldiers thought they had caught them, but the result. Li Dian beside him also felt ashamed and said, "I have been ordered to intercept from the south. Some soldiers have already discovered Lu Jing and Zhao Yun, but they are wearing our soldiers' armor and know the command, so I let them go. It is estimated that Lu Jing and Zhao Yun have escaped over the mountain. I dare not hide it, and I am willing to be punished by the Prime Minister. A bunch of useless things." Cao Cao was extremely angry and cursed fiercely. Despite being unable to catch tens of thousands of people searching the mountains, they managed to escape. He looked at the 2 corpses on the ground and then turned to ask Eugene, "Who is this middle-aged man?" Eugene quickly bowed and said, "It should be the person who broke out with them. I infer that it was under Liu Biao's command, but I don't know why they had an internal conflict." Internal strife. What did this word bring to Cao Cao's mind? He pondered for a long time and asked Cheng Yu, a strategist beside him, "What does Zhong De think?" Cheng Yu understood Cao Cao's thoughts and lightly stroked his grey beard, saying with a smile, "As General Yu and General Li have said, this young man is indeed brave and has a strange plan. He was able to escape from 2 rounds of encirclement. It must be admitted that he is a genius. If he were Lu Jingsheng's son, the Prime Minister would have to catch him to prevent future troubles, but if he were his nephew. Actually, it's not a bad thing to let him go to Jingzhou. If my inference is correct, this young man will definitely cause the Jingzhou rebellion in the future." Cao Cao stroked his beard and nodded. He also believed that Lu Jingsheng's son was like a dolphin dog, but having a powerful nephew was like a black fish entering a fish pond, sooner or later it would cause chaos in Jingzhou. Zhong De thinks, "Can I help him a little more?" Cheng Yu shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't think it's time yet. We should focus on eliminating Yuan Shao and pacifying the north. Jingzhou can observe the changes quietly. If the Prime Minister is interested in this young man, why not send someone to pay attention to him? When the time is right, we can take advantage of him and use him to stir up Jingzhou." Since ancient times, the downfall of the country has always been caused by internal turmoil. Why should the Prime Minister be anxious about this moment? Cheng Yu's words impressed Cao Cao deeply. He pondered for a long time and eventually gave up on continuing to search for the two. He immediately ordered, retreat the troops and return to Xuchang. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. First meeting with Liu Bei. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. First meeting with Liu Bei. Rang Mountain has a continuous and undulating terrain, with one mountain after another stretching for 50 or 60 miles. Lu Jing carried Zhao Yun on his back for nearly 2 hours, and has already walked more than 20 miles. He has left the pursuers behind from a distance, and they are no longer visible. At this moment, Lu Jing was also exhausted. As the morning sun was about to rise in the sky, he found a tangled root of a vine and slowly let Zhao Yun down. With medicine and water, Zhao Yun's injury did not worsen. He even slept and his complexion improved a lot. Although his face was still very pale, the faint dark blue color had faded away. Prince Jing, why don't you take a break too? Zhao Yun smiled and said, I feel a bit strong now. Maybe I can walk on my own later. The two of them experienced a life and death friendship after running for their lives that night. Lu Jing also took a sip of water and handed the kettle to Zhao Yun. Along the way, he found a clear spring and refilled the kettle with water. He gazed at the rising sun in the sky, and the 10,000 zhang glow rendered the sky and the earth incredibly magnificent. The layers of forests were dyed, and although the scenery was picturesque, Lu Jing appeared somewhat preoccupied. Wu Xiu is dead, can he still go to Jingzhou? Although the skin bag is still on him, without Wu Xiu's recommendation, will Liu Biao still believe him? Perhaps, maybe not, everything is unknown. If he doesn't go to Jingzhou, where can he go? Prince Jing, why don't you go to Jingzhou? Zhao Yun smiled slightly on the side and said, you are Liu Biao's nephew. Whether Wu Xiu is here or not, this fact cannot be changed. Zhao Yun let out a soft sigh and said, Prince Jing, when he went to Jingzhou, he did not rely on Liu Biao's support, but instead sought opportunities to showcase his abilities. After this night, I, Zhao Yun, saw a person who was honest, righteous, grateful, and never gave up. I respect him, and I hope you have a good home. Zhao Yun's words also dyed Lu Jing's heart red with the morning glow. He stared at the morning glow gushing out, and a heroic spirit of standing tall in the world rose in his chest. Yeah. Perhaps there may be some risk, but what can be done without risk? My husband can't even bear this risk. What else can he do? Isn't it good to go to Jingzhou? It is not in vain for Liu Biao to come to the Three Kingdoms to seek his family fortune and establish his own achievements. Thinking of this, Lu Jing turned around and smiled at Zhao Yun, saying, if one day, Brother Zilong would also have the opportunity to showcase his abilities and make contributions, would Brother Zilong seize this opportunity? Zhao Yun smiled slightly. He knew Lu Jing's meaning and was not foolish. The words Wu Xiu said before his death made him understand everything. After a while, he said indifferently, I will not betray my lord, just like the young master who never abandons or leaves me, I will also never abandon or leave him. My lord is facing setbacks at this time, and it is the most difficult time. How can I abandon him? Zhao Yun's answer disappointed Lu Jing a bit, but then he felt relieved. If Zhao Yun really betrayed Liu Bei, then he wouldn't be Changshan Zhao Zilong. More importantly, he went too far. It's not yet his time for ambition, but to try to get Liu Biao to acknowledge him first and then establish himself in Jingzhou. This is the issue he should consider at the moment. Lu Jing's mood gradually calmed down and he regained his rationality. He smiled and said, actually, my greatest wish is to be able to practice martial arts like Brother Zilong. Unfortunately, I didn't have this opportunity. Zhao Yun fell silent for a moment. He stared at Lu Jing and said calmly, you will definitely have one. Lu Jing just casually mentioned it. At this moment, he thought of another thing and said, I'm going to Xiangyang too. Maybe I can meet Uncle Lu. If I do meet him, it depends on Zilong's loyalty and righteousness. I'm willing to do my best to help him stay in Jingzhou. Zhao Yun was overjoyed that if Lu Jing could persuade Liu Biao to keep the Lord, then the Lord would not be at a dead end and there would be a new turning point. Thank you, young Master Jing, for your righteousness. Lu Jing nodded. He saw that Zhao Yun's tone of voice was no longer as weak as last night and had clearly improved. He smiled and said, "That bastard's hidden wound medicine is not bad, but unfortunately it's gone. I wonder if there are any herbs nearby." He stood up and looked around. At this moment, he saw a little Taoist carrying a bamboo basket walking towards him from afar. Lu Jing was overjoyed and worried that he couldn't find his way. He immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Taoist, please stay behind." The young Taoist was about 14 or 15 years old, of average height, with thick lips and a sunken nose. He had a simple and honest face and held a medicine hoe in his hand. Suddenly encountering two soldiers in the wilderness, he was startled and quickly clasped his palms in a bow, "Infinite Heavenly Sovereign. Where do the two benefactors come from?" "We are subordinates of Uncle Liu, who were scattered by Chao's army and fled through mountains and valleys. Our companions were seriously injured. I wonder if Chang can help us." He and Zhao Yun were both wearing the armor of Chao soldiers, so they couldn't hide it. They could only take a gamble. Since Liu Bei's name of benevolence and righteousness has spread throughout the world, it depends on whether this little Taoist accepts it. Upon hearing that they were subordinates of Uncle Liu, the young Taoist immediately stood in awe and bowed, saying, "It turns out they were subordinates of Uncle Liu. I will serve as a Taoist myself. Please follow me back to the Taoist temple, it's at the foot of the mountain, and my master will treat the injuries." Lu Jing cursed inwardly. Lu De's reputation is also good, no wonder he is popular everywhere. He and the little Taoist helped Zhao Yun and slowly walked towards the foot of the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there is a Taoist temple called Tianxian Temple, with about 20 Taoist monks. They gather medicine and cultivate fields, are self-sufficient, and their lives are peaceful and worry-free, unaffected by the turmoil of the late Han dynasty. The host is an old Taoist named Rangshan. He used to be a famous doctor and craftsman, but he couldn't cure himself. After his wife and children died of typhoid fever, he became a monk and traveled around the world. Finally, he settled in Rangshan and provided free medical treatment and medicine to the surrounding villagers, earning a high reputation. Rangshan also heard for a long time that Liu Bei was a benevolent and righteous elder. Upon hearing that Liu Bei's subordinates were in trouble, he immediately ordered someone to clean up the quiet room. He personally treated Zhao Yun's injuries, although the arrow poison was quite strong. Fortunately the arrow did not harm his muscles and bones. In addition, Lu Jing's timely treatment stabilized the toxic attack, and Zhao Yun's problem was not very serious. As long as he rested for a month, he could recover. But Zhao Yun was very worried about Liu Bei. With this defeat, all his foundations were completely destroyed, and it was unclear whether the Lord could withstand this blow. He begged Lu Jing to deliver a letter to his lord, but in fact, he hoped that Lu Jing could help Liu Bei stay in Jingzhou. Since Lu Jing had already promised, he would not refuse to take a night off. The next day, Lu Jing set off for Jingzhou. From Rangshan to the west, there is an arc-shaped official road that twists and turns for more than 300 miles, leading to the border of Jingzhou and reaching Bishui. Bishui is also a tributary of the Han River. Going south along Bishui for more than 100 miles, you can reach Xiangyang. But Lu Jing took a shortcut, which saved half the distance compared to taking the official road. He took big steps and quickly headed west in the low hills, constantly comparing the map drawn by the real person Rangshan. The next noon, he felt like he was close to Bishui. On a large stone, Lu Jing carefully searched for his position on the map. From the map, he was right next to Bai Shui, but why can't he see the big river? Lu Jing stood up and looked around, only to see a small hill 100 steps away. There was a straight tree on the hill, about 4 or 5 zhang high. He immediately ran towards the hill. Not long after, Lu Jing climbed up a big tree and set up a curtain to explore the west. His vision suddenly became broader. A few miles away, a river flowed quietly like a jade belt on the wilderness. He also saw the official road. At the end of the road, there seemed to be dozens of small black spots, like tents, stationed by the banks of the Bisui River. Found it. Lu Jing cheered, slid down the tree, ran down the hill, and ran towards the official road in the distance. Half an hour later, Lu Jing finally arrived at the garrison of Liu Bei's army. There were still 100 steps away from the camp, and 2 cavalry soldiers rushed to stop Lu Jing. Front military camp, no entry allowed. Lu Jing arched his hands slightly and said, "Please tell Uncle Lu that General Zhao Yun has entrusted me to deliver a letter." "Young master, please wait." The cavalry turned their horses back, and not long after, a scholar approached and bowed to Lu Jing, saying, "Does this young master know about General Zhao's situation?" Lu Jing saw that the scholar was about 30 years old, with a long beard under his jaw, clear eyes, calm demeanor, and a refined demeanor. He smiled and said, "I was rescued by General Zhao and escaped from the battlefield, but General Zhao was unfortunately injured. We escaped the pursuit of the Chao army all the way. Now General Zhao is staying at the Tianxian temple in Rangshan to recuperate. He asked me to report peace to Uncle Lu." "I see, young master, please come with me." The scholar led Lu Jing towards the tent, and Lu Jing couldn't help but ask curiously, "May I have your surname, sir?" The scholar smiled slightly and said, "I am Sun Qian, with the courtesy name Gongyu, from Beihai County." Lu Jing nodded inwardly, so he's Sun Qian. Sun Qian suddenly remembered forgetting to ask Lu Jing's name and quickly smiled, "It's really impolite. I forgot to ask the young master for his surname and name. I, Lu Jing, the nephew of Lu Jingzhou, passed through Runan and was rescued by General Zhao Yun." Sun Qian heard that he was the nephew of Lu Biao and couldn't help but respect him deeply. "It turns out he was Prince Jing, and I was impolite," he said. The two of them walked into the campsite and saw a group of people gathering by the river from afar. Sun Qian apologized and said, "Please wait a moment, young master. My lord will just talk to everyone and we will receive you soon. Why don't you go ahead and get busy, sir?" Sun Qian pleaded guilty and hurriedly left. About 100 steps away from the crowd, Lu Jing leaned against the grain cart, his hands crossed on his chest, and his gaze remained indifferent as he watched Liu Bei and his subordinates hold a meeting. He was a little curious, not sure if it was as he had imagined. Liu Bei first despair and sorrow, and then everyone expressed their loyalty. However, from a common sense, it should be like this. Liu Bei always gives his former subordinates a choice. If he wants to go to Jingzhou, he can't force others to follow him too. At the same time, it can also test the loyalty of one's subordinates, which can be described as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At this moment, he heard someone angrily shouting, "Big brother, what are you talking about? We have been fighting in the south and north for more than 10 years. When have we ever despised Big Brother? If Big Brother says this again, I, Zhang Yida, will immediately jump into the river and commit suicide." "This is Zhang Fei," Lu Jing smiled knowingly. It sounded very straightforward, but he didn't know what his temperament was. Then came a peaceful voice. "Have you forgotten about the matter of Emperor Gaozu? You have been defeated repeatedly by Xiangyu, which led to the success of the Battle of Gaixia. Despite your ups and downs, you are still able to stand firm and not be destroyed. What about Yuan Shu and Yuan Shao's foundation? You have only encountered a small setback now, just stand up again. Since this is already Jingsheng, we can temporarily rely on Lu Biao to make a comeback. This should be Guan Yu, looking at his back, he really looks majestic." Lu Jing also let out a slight sigh in his heart. Although Liu Bei had encountered setbacks repeatedly, his perseverance was truly admirable, and he was very good at being a person. He had already escaped and even ordered Zhao Yun to save Liu Bei. He refused to give up easily. No wonder so many people were willing to follow him in this way of being a person. Prince Jing. Sun Qian walked up again and saluted him with a smile, saying, "My lord, could you please come over?" End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Liu Jingsheng's Troubles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Liu Jingsheng's Troubles. Liu Jing nodded and followed Sun Qian quickly to the side of the carriage. Liu Bei felt a bit unwell and couldn't withstand the cold wind on the river, so he sat back in the carriage. The carriage is spacious and sturdy, and is a clothing cart, also known as a bamboo cart. It was originally used in the palace to load clothes because it can lie down and has windows on both sides. Therefore, most long-distance people are also willing to ride this type of carriage. This is the carriage of Liu Bei's 2 wives. Liu Bei felt tired and unwell all the way, and just now he was blown by the river wind, making his body even more uncomfortable. His face looked very pale, and he lay on a thick blanket, visible in front of the car window. "My dear nephew, my body can't hold up, it's a bit impolite." Liu Bei's slightly hoarse voice came from the carriage. It was Liu Jing's first time meeting Liu Bei, and his first impression was that he had big ears, which could be considered a symbol of Liu Bei. The rest of him looked ordinary, and if he sat in a shop, he would be a complete shopkeeper. However, Liu Bei's smile was very friendly and approachable, making it easy to get a good impression. In the carriage sat 2 young women with delicate figures, probably Lady Mi and Lady Gan, both of whom were about the same age, both in their 20s and very delicate. They wore the most popular falling horse bun from the end of the Han dynasty, both wearing straight long skirts, one in a green skirt and the other in a red skirt. One had a fair round face, with a slightly mediocre appearance, while the other was exceptionally beautiful. Although Liu Jing did not know who Lady Gan and Lady Mi were, he could guess that Liu Bei married Lady Mi in order to obtain financial support from the Mi family, while Lady Gan was just a concubine. So, wearing a green dress and having a pretty appearance, it should be Lady Gan, a man marrying a concubine. Always look at beauty first. Perhaps because the 2 ladies have been wandering with Liu Bei for a long time, they have also become accustomed to coexisting with the soldiers and do not shy away. Speaking of which, Liu Bei and Liu Biao are of the same family and are his elders. Liu Jing, who came all the way, was repeatedly instructed by Wu Xiu on etiquette. It was necessary for younger generations to kneel before their elders, and so on, which made his head grow bigger. Now the problem arises. Liu Bei is sitting in the carriage, standing outside. If he kneels and bows, his shadow will disappear, which is obviously not appropriate. Liu Jing decided to bow long and give a bow. Young generation Liu Jing, see Uncle Huang. Liu Bei sat in the carriage, squinting his eyes to look at Liu Jing outside the carriage. He was 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders, a slightly longer face, sword-like eyebrows, a straight and upright nose bridge, and an extraordinary appearance. Liu Bei secretly praised him for being such a powerful young man. Liu Jingsheng had several nephews, whom he had heard of before. However, the young man in front of him, although he was burly and had an extraordinary appearance, did not have the kind of well-educated and refined demeanor in his every move, but rather had a bit of a wild and mountainous aura. Although he thought so, Liu Bei's face was still full of gratitude and said, "You don't need to be polite, my dear nephew. Just hearing about Zilong's news has relieved my heart. Thank you very much for bringing me the news. I will immediately send someone to visit him. I wonder how his injury is now." He was hit by a poisoned arrow, fortunately he did not harm his muscles and bones. After detoxification, he will be able to recover by recuperating for another month. Oh. The wise nephew said that he must have been chased by the Chao army all the way, which must be very heart-wrenching. It can only be said that luck was good. Chao personally sent people to search the mountains, but we managed to escape. I heard that Chao's army had already gone north. Liu Jing spoke lightly about the escape, and he didn't want to talk much. Liu Bei then asked with concern, "How could you be alone in Runan, your father's court?" Liu Jing's eyes showed a look of sadness. "My younger father passed away early, and my mother unfortunately passed away last year. Uncle sent someone to pick me up and take me to Jingzhou. Our group of 4 rode on ox carts through Runan, only to encounter cavalry from the Chao army. Our family's coachman was killed, and Wu Shuzhua and I jumped into the water to escape the disaster. Later, we were rescued by General Liu Bei and General Zhao Yun." At this moment, Sun Qian sighed and said, "It turns out that the young master is the son of Lu Wensheng." Liu Jing's heart moved. "Does Sun Qian know anything?" He quickly asked, "Does Mr. Sun know my father?" Sun Qian nodded and said, "I met once 10 years ago, I'm not very familiar with it, but—" Sun Qian was about to say more, but Liu Bei gave him a glance and Sun Qian immediately remained silent. Liu Bei sighed and said, "The war is chaotic, and human life is as lowly as grass. If the young master can escape his life, it is also a blessing from heaven. Lucky. Destiny." With a change of tone, Liu Bei smiled and asked, "Is your virtuous nephew going to Xiangyang now?" "Exactly, if Uncle Huang also wants to go, we happen to be together. General Liu Bei and General Zhao have shown me life-saving kindness, and I must make Uncle thank Uncle Huang well." Liu Bei understood his meaning in his heart and nodded with a smile. In fact, when Sun Qian mentioned that he was Liu Biao's nephew, Liu Bei had an idea of whether he could use this young man to enhance his relationship with Liu Biao. It was just the first time we met, and he couldn't say that. However, since the young man had offered to help and was quite reasonable, Liu Bei just spoke up. "I plan to go to Xiangyang to temporarily shelter from Chao Junfeng, but I'm also worried that your uncle won't be very convenient, so I'm a bit in a dilemma." Liu Bei couldn't say the rest, but he believed that Liu Jing would understand. Of course, Liu Jing understood Liu Bei's implied meaning and let him speak up for him. He actually thought of this favorable situation long ago. Anyway, in history, Liu Biao would definitely agree. More importantly, when he took Liu Bei to Jingzhou, his nephew's weight also increased, which was beneficial to him. He gave a long bow and said, "Elders have entrusted me, Liu Jing will serve you on his own." Liu Jing went down to rest for a moment. At this moment, Sun Qiankai whispered, "Lord, if he were the son of Lu Wensheng, I had seen him 5 years ago, but it's a bit different. That Lu Qigong is knowledgeable, rational, and gentle, while this Lu Qigong seems a bit." Before he could finish speaking, Liu Bei waved his hand and said, "This is normal. After all, it has been 5 years, and people can change. Don't think too much about it. We should consider cooperation. Gong Yu, we will go to Xiangyang with him this time and ask him to help you as much as possible and persuade Lu Jingsheng to stay with us." After speaking, Liu Bei gave Sun Qian a meaningful glance, and Sun Qian suddenly understood Liu Bei's profound meaning. There were indeed some things that could not be delved into yet. Dang dang dang. The melodious sound of bells on the top of Xiangyang city awakened this ancient city with a long history. A round of sunrise slowly rose from the east, and millions of magnificent rays of light shone towards the largest city in Jingzhou, sweeping away the last trace of dusk that enveloped the city. In a huge mansion in the west of Xiangyang city, a middle-aged man wearing a blue scarf, a white brocade robe, and a purple ribbon tied around his waist slowly walked along a long corridor. The morning sun passed through the bottom eaves of the corridor and shone on the middle-aged man. He is 8 feet long, with a burly physique, a white beard on his face, deep gaze, and occasionally a hint of sharpness, giving people a feeling of not being angry but majestic. However, his sleeves are wide, and he walks like a fairy, with an indescribable gentleness in his every move and gesture. He was the general of Zhenan, Marquis Qinggu, and Governor Liu Biao of Jingzhou. He had been the lord of Jingzhou for 11 years. After 11 years of pacification and conquest, he went from being alone as the governor of Jingzhou to becoming a local vassal with over 100,000 armored soldiers and thousands of miles of territory today. Liu Bei has been in a bad mood for the past few days due to his wife. His wife is the daughter of the Kai family in Xianyang, married for several years without children, and finally became pregnant a few months ago. But just 5 days ago, his wife suddenly felt pain in her stomach and invited all the famous doctors in Xianyang to protect her pregnancy. In the end, she was unable to survive and lost her child, which made Liu Bei feel very sad. The continuity of offspring has always been a major event in official and aristocratic families, especially Lady Kai. Her son is likely to become the future ruler of Jingzhou, and it is precisely because of this that Lady Kai's small inheritance has become a major event in the Liu family. For 2 consecutive days, everyone in the Liu family spent in chaos, and even Liu Bei couldn't attend to his official duties. He stayed at home for 2 days, comforting his wife who was in great pain. Early in the morning, he came to visit his wife, wondering if her mood had improved. Liu Bei walked down the steps with his hands down, crossed a delicate stone path, and arrived at a small courtyard. Inside the courtyard, there was a red small building, which was the small courtyard where his wife lived. The bamboo in the courtyard was lush and particularly lush, standing out in the green. Liu Bei had just walked to the door when it opened. A hunched old woman in a goose skirt walked out of the courtyard carrying a food box. She looked up and saw Liu Bei, startled, and quickly stood aside, bowing her head and respectfully saying, "Master." This old woman came with Lady Kai as a dowager. She is actually Lady Kai's wet nurse and has been living in the Kai mansion. Due to an abortion, Lady Kai brought her wet nurse to take care of herself. "How is Madam's situation? Is it better now?" Liu Bei asked with concern. The old woman sighed and shook her head. "Master, Madam is not in good spirits, she." "What's wrong with her?" "Madam said she wants to move back to her parents' house for recuperation." "I know now, go ahead and get busy." Liu Bei watched the old woman's hunched back walk away, and his face suddenly darkened. In the past 2 days, his wife has suggested more than once to go to her mother's house for recuperation. It's normal for a woman to want to go to her mother's house for recuperation, but Liu Bei is very clear about the thoughts of the person beside her. She is trying to turn her guilt towards her into guilt towards the Kai family. He married the daughter of the Kai family also for the sake of alliance with the Kai family and political interests, but Liu Bei still liked this young wife and accommodated her in everything. However, Liu Bei was a bit dissatisfied with her attitude towards her family. Generally speaking, it is common for a wife to lean slightly towards her family, and there must be a certain degree to be taken seriously. However, her wife has not mastered this degree, and she is too inclined towards the Kai family, even willing to use her small fortune to write articles. Liu Bei stopped in his tracks as he prepared to step into the yard. He pondered for a moment and turned away with his hands down. The Jingzhou governor's office is located in the west of Xianyang city, adjacent to Liu Bei's mansion. It is the political center of the entire Jingzhou region, covering an area of 300 acres, with over 100 officials of all sizes and Liu Bei's staff busy in this office. Under the escort of dozens of attendants, Liu Bei rode his horse to the government office. As soon as he arrived at the main entrance, a clerk approached and reported, to the governor, "The envoy of Emperor Liu Xuande has arrived and is waiting in the guest hall." Liu Bei's face showed a hint of knowing smile, as if he knew that Liu Bei's envoy was coming. He nodded and dismounted. At this moment, Shuzhua hesitated for a moment and said, "The same person who came was still the nephew of the governor, Prince Jing." Liu Bei was immediately overjoyed. A few days ago, he also heard that there was a war in Runan. Counting the time, his nephew Liu Jing happened to be passing through Runan, causing him great concern. He was afraid that he would encounter misfortune and also worried that he would be taken hostage by the Chao army. Now that I finally heard his news, Liu Bei was overjoyed and said, "Where is he? Take me to see him." Prince Jing seems to have come with Liu Bei's envoy. I heard he met him in Runan. Liu Bei walked quickly towards the official office. As soon as he arrived at the corridor, an official dressed in a purple robe turned out from behind the cylinder and bowed in a long bow. Lord, I have a message, he said. This person is about 40 years old, standing 7.5 feet tall, with broad shoulders, strong and sturdy arms, slightly yellow skin, slender eyes, and a tall and straight eagle nose that makes him somewhat cunning. He is Liu Bei's brother. Law, Kai Mao, who was then a military commander in Jingzhou. The four famous families in Jingzhou are Kai, Kuai, Pang, and Huang. Among them, the Kai family in Xianyang ranks first, and Kai Mao is the head of the Kai family, holding great power in Jingzhou. He is not only the top deputy of Liu Bei, participating in military decision-making, but also holding tens of thousands of military power in Xianyang, holding a crucial position in Jingzhou. He had been waiting for a while, and finally arrived at Liu Bei, saying, I suggest that the Lord should not see Liu Bei's envoy. Although Liu Bei was somewhat dissatisfied with the Kai family over his wife's argument about going back to his mother's house to have a baby, he did not argue with Kai Mao over such a small matter. He smiled lightly behind his back and asked, could it be that Liu Bei, the envoy, was carrying a sharp blade and had ulterior motives in his heart? He was subtly telling Kai Mao that you were making a big fuss and losing your manners. Kai Mao's face turned red and he quickly explained, the person who came is Sun Qian. It's okay for the Lord to see him, but Liu Bei is at a dead end and must have come to seek refuge with the Lord. He will bring trouble to Jingzhou. If the Lord accepts Liu Bei, he will find an excuse for the Chao army to attack Jingzhou. Liu Bei glanced at Kai Mao and smiled, let's talk about meeting people first. It seems like my nephew is also here. Have the military officers seen him? Master, you're talking about Prince Jing. I just saw that he looks talented, but... But what? Liu Bei looked at him with a strange expression. Kai Mao originally intended to say that Liu Jing's body was mostly filled with reckless and murderous aura, but lacked a hint of gentleness and weakness, unlike the children of the Liu family. However, when he spoke, he swallowed it back and bowed with a smile, saying, it seems that Prince Jing is a martial arts practitioner. End of this chapter.